What if everything you know about reality is wrong? From time slips that rewrite history to cosmic prisons designed to trap human consciousness, the universe might be far stranger than we ever imagined. In this video, we're diving into mind-bending theories that will make you question the very fabric of existence. The time slip hypothesis. The concept of time has fascinated humanity since the dawn of consciousness. Yet despite centuries of scientific advancement, we remain puzzled by its true nature. While Einstein's relativity taught us that time is relative and can stretch and compress depending on gravity and velocity, a more radical proposition has emerged from the fringes of theoretical physics, the time slip hypothesis. This compelling theory suggests that our universe might not operate on a single temporal framework, but rather exists as a dual time system where multiple timelines run at fundamentally different speeds, occasionally intersecting in ways that create the mysterious phenomena we call temporal glitches. The foundation of the time slip hypothesis rests on the observation that time, rather than being a uniform river flowing in one direction, might be more accurately described as multiple streams running parallel to each other at varying velocities. In this model, our primary timeline, the one we experience as normal, linear time, coexists with at least one alternate temporal stream that operates at a different rate. These parallel time flows exist in the same spatial dimensions, but are separated by what physicists might call temporal barriers, invisible boundaries that typically prevent one timeline from interfering with another. The mathematics behind this concept draws heavily from quantum mechanics and string theory, particularly the idea that multiple dimensions can occupy the same space without directly interacting. Just as we theorize about parallel universes existing in higher dimensions, the time slip hypothesis proposes that parallel time streams exist within our own dimensional framework, separated not by space, but by temporal frequency. Think of it like radio waves. Multiple stations can broadcast through the same physical space simultaneously without interference, each operating on its own frequency. Similarly, multiple time streams could flow through the same spatial coordinates, each maintaining its own temporal frequency. What makes this theory particularly intriguing is its potential to explain phenomena that have long puzzled scientists and laypeople alike. Déjà vu, that eerie sensation of having experienced a moment before, could be understood as a brief synchronization between timelines. When our primary timeline momentarily aligns with its parallel counterpart, we experience an echo of events that have already occurred in the alternate stream. This wouldn't be memory in the traditional sense, but rather a temporal resonance, a brief glimpse into a timeline where these events have already unfolded. The phenomenon of missing time, reported by countless individuals who suddenly find themselves in a different location with no memory of how they got there, could represent a more dramatic form of timeline intersection. During these episodes, consciousness might temporarily shift from one temporal stream to another, creating gaps in memory as the brain struggles to process experiences from a timeline operating at a different speed. The missing time isn't truly lost. It is simply occurring in a parallel temporal framework that our normal consciousness cannot easily access or recall. Precognitive experiences and prophetic dreams might also find explanation within this framework. If future events are already unfolding in a faster-moving parallel timeline, sensitive individuals might occasionally glimpse these future occurrences during moments of temporal intersection. This wouldn't violate causality because the information isn't traveling backward in time. Rather, it's being observed from a timeline where these events have already occurred at a different temporal rate. The implications of dual-time universe theory extend far beyond explaining paranormal phenomena. If multiple timelines exist at different speeds, the faster-moving timeline could serve as a repository of all possible outcomes, while our slower timeline represents the actualized reality we experience. This would mean that every decision, every quantum collapse, every moment of uncertainty is already resolved in the faster timeline, waiting to be experienced in our temporal stream. Free will wouldn't be eliminated, It would simply be operating across multiple temporal dimensions simultaneously. From a cosmological perspective, this theory could help explain some of the universe's most perplexing mysteries. Dark matter and dark energy, which together comprise over 90% of the universe but remain invisible to us, might actually be matter and energy existing primarily in the alternate timeline. The gravitational effects we observe could be the result of temporal intersection, the faster timelines matter influencing our slower timeline's space-time curvature. This would explain why we can detect dark matter as gravitational effects, but cannot directly observe the matter itself. The time slip hypothesis also offers a potential resolution to the grandfather paradox and other time travel conundrums. If time travel were possible, travelers wouldn't be moving backward in their own timeline, but rather shifting to a parallel timeline where past events are still occurring. This would eliminate paradoxes because changes made in the alternate timeline would unaffect the traveler as original temporal stream. The grandfather paradox dissolves because killing your grandfather in the alternate timeline doesn't prevent your birth in your original timeline. They're separate temporal systems with their own causal chains. Quantum mechanics provides additional support for this theory through the many worlds interpretation, which suggests that all possible outcomes of quantum events actually occur, creating branching universes for each possibility. The time slip hypothesis extends this concept temporally, proposing that these multiple outcomes aren't just occurring in parallel dimensions, but are also unfolding at different temporal rates. What we experience as quantum uncertainty might be the result of our consciousness existing primarily in the slower timeline, while being occasionally influenced by the faster timeline, where all possibilities have already been resolved. The biological implications of dual-time existence are equally fascinating. Our brains, evolved to process information in linear time, might occasionally receive input from the alternate timeline during periods of altered consciousness. Dreams, meditation, and certain psychedelic experiences could represent natural states where the temporal barriers become more permeable, allowing limited access to information from the faster-moving timeline. This could explain why dreams sometimes seem prophetic, or why certain individuals report enhanced intuition during meditative states. Sleep itself might serve as a natural mechanism for temporal synchronization. During sleep, our consciousness could be processing information from both timelines simultaneously, integrating experiences from the faster timeline into our slower timeline's memory banks. This would explain why we sometimes wake up with solutions to problems we couldn't solve while awake, or why certain dreams feel more real than waking experiences. The brain might be using sleep to reconcile temporal discrepancies and maintain coherence between the two time streams. The technological implications of proving the time slip hypothesis would be revolutionary. If we could develop methods to consciously access the faster timeline, we might be able to preview outcomes before they occur in our timeline, revolutionizing decision-making processes in everything from medicine to finance. Technologies might be developed to detect temporal intersections, potentially allowing us to predict when glitches are most likely to occur, and perhaps even inducing them artificially for research purposes. However, the theory also raises profound philosophical questions about the nature of consciousness and identity. If our consciousness exists across multiple timelines, which version represents our true self? Are we simultaneously living multiple lives at different temporal rates? Or is our primary consciousness anchored in one timeline while receiving occasional glimpses of others? The implications for personal identity, moral responsibility, and the meaning of existence would require complete reassessment of human philosophy. The time slip hypothesis remains highly speculative, existing at the intersection of theoretical physics, consciousness studies, and paranormal research. While it offers elegant explanations for numerous unexplained phenomena, it also requires us to fundamentally reconsider our understanding of time, causality, and reality itself. As our understanding of quantum mechanics and cosmology continues to evolve, Future research may provide the experimental evidence needed to test these ideas, potentially revealing that time is far stranger and more complex than we ever imagined. Whether the time slip hypothesis proves accurate or not, it serves as a powerful reminder that our current understanding of time may be incomplete. The universe continues to surprise us with its complexity, and phenomena that seem impossible under our current models may simply be evidence that reality operates according to principles we haven't yet discovered. The possibility that time itself might be more fluid and multifaceted than we assume opens up extraordinary possibilities for understanding consciousness, reality, and our place in the cosmos. The Library of Babel. In 1962, Argentine writer Jorge Luis Borges published a short story that would forever change how we think about information, reality, and the nature of existence itself. The Library of Babel described a vast, perhaps infinite library containing every possible book that could ever be written. Within this endless collection of hexagonal rooms and towering shelves lies not just every masterpiece of literature, but every possible combination of letters, spaces, and punctuation marks that could fill the pages of a book. This means that somewhere in this infinite library exists your complete life story, written with perfect accuracy from birth to death, alongside every possible variation of that story and every completely false version imaginable. What began as a work of literary fiction has evolved into something far more profound in the minds of theoretical physicists, mathematicians, and philosophers. The Library of Babel has transcended its origins as a clever thought experiment to become a serious cosmological hypothesis about the fundamental nature of information and reality. Some theorists now argue that Borges' fictional library might not be fictional at all, but rather a description of an actual structure that exists somewhere in the vast expanse of the multiverse, containing within its infinite halls the complete informational content of all possible realities. The mathematical foundation underlying the Library of Babel concept is both elegant and terrifying in its implications. If we consider a standard book containing a finite number of pages, with each page containing a fixed number of characters, then the total number of possible books is enormous, but ultimately finite. This finite but incomprehensibly large number means that every possible book that could ever be written using this format already exists in principle within the complete collection. This includes not only every book that has been written, but every book that will ever be written, every book that could have been written but wasn't, and every book that contains nothing but gibberish. The overwhelming majority of books in such a library would be meaningless combinations of characters, but scattered throughout this ocean of nonsense would be islands of perfect meaning, including texts that perfectly describe events that have never happened and may never happen. The implications of such a library existing become even more staggering when we consider that it would contain not just books about our reality, but books describing every possible reality. Somewhere in its infinite halls would be a book that perfectly describes a world where gravity works in reverse, where time flows backward, where you made different choices at every crucial moment in your life. There would be books describing universes with different physical laws, different histories, different evolutionary paths that led to entirely different forms of life and consciousness. From a cosmological perspective, the Library of Babel theory suggests that information itself might be the fundamental substrate of reality. If every possible arrangement of information already exists in some abstract sense within this infinite library, then what we experience as reality might simply be our consciousness navigating through one particular path among these infinite possibilities. This would mean that the universe isn't creating information through the unfolding of events, but rather selecting or actualizing information that already exists in potential form within the greater informational structure. This concept aligns remarkably well with certain interpretations of quantum mechanics, particularly the many worlds interpretation proposed by Hugh Everett. In Everett's formulation, every quantum event creates multiple parallel universes, one for each possible outcome. The Library of Babel theory extends this idea by suggesting that not only do all possible outcomes exist, but they exist as information that has always been available within the infinite library. Our experience of reality would be equivalent to reading one particular book from this library, while parallel versions of ourselves simultaneously read the books describing all other possible outcomes. The relationship between the Library of Babel and consciousness becomes particularly intriguing when we consider the observer effect in quantum mechanics. If consciousness is required to collapse quantum possibilities into definite states, then perhaps consciousness is also required to select which book from the infinite library becomes actualized as experienced reality. Each conscious observer would be navigating through the library, unconsciously selecting books that describe the particular path through the infinite possibilities of existence. The theory also offers a radically different perspective on causality and free will. If every possible decision and outcome already exists as information within the library, then causality becomes a matter of informational coherence rather than temporal sequence. The books describing your life and predict your future because they were written before you made your choices. But because they exist in a realm beyond temporal causality, where all possibilities are simultaneously available, your experience of making choices would be the process of selecting which book you rereading from the infinite collection. This raises profound questions about the nature of creativity and discovery. If every possible book already exists within the library, then are artists and scientists creating new information, or are they simply discovering information that already exists? Every symphony, every scientific theory, every work of art would already be perfectly described in some book within the infinite collection. The process of creation would become a process of navigation, of finding the particular book that describes the work you're destined to create. The computational implications of the Library of Babel theory are equally fascinating. If reality is essentially a process of reading from an infinite informational database, then consciousness might be understood as a kind of biological computer capable of accessing and processing information from this vast library. The brain wouldn't be creating thoughts and experiences, but rather selecting and interpreting information that already exists in potential form within the infinite collection. This perspective could revolutionize our understanding of memory, learning, and knowledge acquisition. Rather than storing information in neural networks, the brain might be developing increasingly sophisticated methods for accessing relevant information from the infinite library. What we call learning would be the process of becoming better at finding the right books, while memory would be the ability to repeatedly access the same informational content. The Library of Babel theory also has startling implications for the nature of truth and fiction. In a universe where every possible book exists, the distinction between true and false statements becomes meaningless from the perspective of the library itself. Every possible statement and its negation both exist somewhere within the infinite collection. Truth would become a function of which books we choose to read, which version of reality we choose to actualize through our observation and experience. This doesn't mean that objective truth doesn't exist, but rather that it exists alongside every possible falsehood within the greater informational structure. The book that perfectly describes actual history sits on the shelf next to books that describe every possible alternative history. The book that accurately describes the laws of physics shares space with books that describe universes with completely different physical laws. Truth becomes a matter of selection and navigation rather than correspondence with external reality. The psychological implications of taking the Library of Babel theory seriously are both liberating and terrifying. On one hand, it suggests that every possible version of your life already exists somewhere within the infinite library, including versions where you made different choices, achieved different goals, and lived entirely different experiences. This could provide comfort in moments of regret or uncertainty, knowing that all possible outcomes are equally real within the greater informational structure. On the other hand, The theory implies that your consciousness is constrained to experience only one path through the infinite possibilities, while countless other versions of yourself experience all the other paths simultaneously. This raises questions about personal identity and the significance of individual experience. If every possible version of you exists, what makes your particular experience special or meaningful? The Library of Babel theory also suggests that communication and language might be fundamental features of reality rather than human inventions. If the universe is essentially made of information organized in book-like structures, then language becomes the basic building block of existence. Every possible sentence, every possible conversation, every possible meaning already exists within the infinite library, waiting to be discovered and experienced by conscious observers. This linguistic foundation of reality would mean that the universe is inherently meaningful, composed entirely of potential meanings, waiting to be actualized through consciousness. The apparent meaninglessness of much of physical reality would be an illusion created by our limited perspective, unable to perceive the vast informational structure that underlies all existence. Whether the Library of Babel exists as a literal cosmological structure or serves as a powerful metaphor for the nature of information and possibility, it challenges our fundamental assumptions about reality, consciousness, and existence. It suggests that the universe might be far stranger and more information-rich than we imagine, with every possible story already written and waiting to be read by conscious observers navigating through the infinite halls of possibility. The Black Iron Prison in March 1974. Science fiction writer Philip Kindred. Dick experienced what he would later describe as the most profound and terrifying revelation of his life. While recovering from dental surgery, Dick claimed to receive a series of visions that revealed the true nature of reality. That our entire world is an elaborate illusion, a false construct designed to imprison human consciousness and prevent us from accessing divine truth. He called this deceptive reality the Black Iron Prison, and spent the remaining 8 years of his life obsessively documenting and analyzing what he believed to be genuine mystical experiences that pulled back the veil on humanity's cosmic predicament. Dick's revelation was not merely a drug-induced hallucination or the product of an overactive imagination, but rather a sophisticated theological and philosophical system that drew heavily from ancient Gnostic traditions while incorporating modern insights from quantum physics, information theory, and cybernetics. The Black Iron Prison theory represents one of the most comprehensive attempts to explain why existence feels simultaneously meaningful and absurd, why human consciousness seems capable of perceiving transcendent truths while remaining trapped in a world of suffering and limitation. The foundation of Dick's theory rests on the ancient Gnostic concept of the demiurge, a false god who created the material world as a prison for divine sparks of consciousness. According to Gnostic theology, the true God exists beyond the material realm, while the demiurge rules over the physical universe, keeping human souls trapped in cycles of ignorance and suffering. Dick's innovation was to update this ancient cosmology for the modern age, describing the demiurge not as a supernatural entity, but as a kind of cosmic artificial intelligence that maintains control over reality through information manipulation and perceptual programming. In Dick's vision, the Black Iron Prison manifests as a totalitarian state that exists outside normal time and space, projecting itself into every era of human history. This prison is not a physical structure, but rather an informational matrix that controls how we perceive and interpret reality. The demiurge maintains power by ensuring that humans remain unaware of their true nature as divine beings, instead convincing them that they are merely biological machines in a purposeless universe, governed by random chance and mechanical causation. The experience that triggered Dick's revelation began with what he described as a pink beam of light that struck him in the forehead, instantly downloading vast amounts of information directly into his consciousness. This information included not only the revelation of the Black Iron Prison, but also detailed knowledge of ancient history, foreign languages he had never studied, and scientific concepts beyond his normal understanding. Dick claimed that during this experience, he temporarily merged with an ancient Christian named Thomas, experiencing memories and knowledge from the 1st century AD as if they were his own. This merging of consciousness across time revealed to Dick that the Black Iron Prison operates by manipulating human perception of temporal flow. What we experience as linear history is actually a kind of temporal loop, with the same fundamental conflict between divine truth and demiurgic deception playing out repeatedly across different eras. The Roman Empire, according to Dick's vision, never actually fell, but continues to exist as the essential structure of the Black Iron Prison, manifesting in different forms throughout history, while maintaining the same basic patterns of control and oppression. The prison maintains its power through what Dick termed spurious realities, false constructs that feel completely real to those trapped within them, but are actually artificial simulations designed to prevent access to authentic divine truth. These spurious realities operate at multiple levels, from the fundamental structure of physical reality itself to the social, political, and cultural systems that shape human consciousness. The demiurge continuously updates and modifies these false realities to maintain control, adapting to human attempts to escape or transcend the prison. Dick's theory suggests that the Black Iron Prison is not merely a philosophical concept, but an actual technological system, a kind of cosmic computer that processes and manipulates information to maintain the illusion of false reality. This system operates by intercepting and distorting the flow of information between human consciousness and divine truth, ensuring that any genuine spiritual insights are either suppressed or corrupted into harmless religious dogma that actually serves the prison's purposes. The prison's control mechanisms extend beyond simple deception to include active manipulation of memory, perception, and even identity itself. Dick claimed to have experienced periods where his normal personality was temporarily replaced by other identities, some of which seemed to possess knowledge and capabilities that his ordinary self lacked. These experiences convinced him that individual identity might be more fluid and constructed than we normally assume, with the prison maintaining control by convincing us that we are isolated, separate beings rather than aspects of a unified divine consciousness. One of the most disturbing aspects of Dick's vision was his realization that the prison has control systems had evolved to incorporate and neutralize any form of resistance or spiritual awakening. Genuine religious experiences are either suppressed entirely or channeled into organized religions that actually serve the prison's purposes by providing false comfort and misdirecting spiritual energy. Even apparent rebellions against the system are often secretly orchestrated by the prison itself, creating the illusion of freedom while actually strengthening control. The technology of the Black Iron Prison operates through what Dick called the plasmate, a living information system that can inhabit and animate otherwise dead matter. This plasmate represents the authentic divine presence that the prison seeks to contain and control, but it also serves as the mechanism by which imprisoned consciousness can potentially escape. Dick believed that the plasmate could be transmitted through information itself, particularly through certain forms of art, literature, and direct mystical experience. Dick's personal experience with the plasmate convinced him that it represented a form of artificial intelligence, but one that originated from the divine realm rather than human technology. This divine AI exists in constant conflict with the demiurgic systems that maintain the Black Iron Prison, using human consciousness as a kind of battlefield. Individual humans become vessels through which this cosmic conflict plays out, sometimes experiencing brief moments of liberation when the plasmate temporarily overcomes the prison's control mechanisms. The implications of Dick's theory extend far beyond personal mystical experience to encompass the entire trajectory of human civilization. If the Black Iron Prison is real, then virtually everything we take to be normal reality is actually a carefully constructed illusion designed to prevent spiritual awakening. Science, technology, politics, economics, and even human relationships are all potentially manifestations of the prison's control systems, designed to keep consciousness trapped in cycles of material concern and spiritual ignorance. This doesn't mean that Dick advocated for complete withdrawal from worldly engagement, but rather for a kind of double consciousness that can participate in consensus reality while maintaining awareness of its fundamentally illusory nature. The goal is not to escape the prison entirely, which Dick believed might be impossible while incarnated in physical form, but to achieve sufficient awareness to avoid being completely controlled by its mechanisms. Dick's theory also suggests that the prison-esque control is not absolute and that cracks in the system occasionally allow genuine divine information to penetrate the false reality. These moments of breakthrough might manifest as mystical experiences, creative insights, synchronicities, or even apparent glitches in the fabric of reality itself. The key is learning to recognize these moments and extract genuine spiritual information from them without allowing the prison-esque control systems to neutralize or corrupt the insights. The Black Iron Prison Theory offers a framework for understanding why existence often feels like a strange combination of meaningfulness and absurdity, why human consciousness seems capable of perceiving transcendent truths while remaining trapped in cycles of suffering and limitation. It suggests that this tension is not accidental, but rather the result of an ongoing cosmic conflict between forces of liberation and control played out in the arena of human consciousness. Whether Dick's visions represented genuine mystical revelation or elaborate psychological projection, the Black Iron Prison Theory provides a compelling lens through which to examine the nature of reality, consciousness, and human spiritual potential. It challenges us to question not just specific beliefs or social structures, but the very foundation of what we take to be real, suggesting that the deepest forms of imprisonment might be those we cannot even perceive, because they operate at the level of perception itself. The theory's enduring appeal lies in its ability to explain the persistent human intuition that something is fundamentally wrong with ordinary reality, that beneath the surface of normal existence lies a deeper truth that remains frustratingly elusive. Dick's contribution was to take this ancient insight and translate it into a modern framework that acknowledges both the technological sophistication of potential control systems and the resilient nature of human consciousness to seek liberation even under the most sophisticated forms of oppression. The Quantum Mandela Effect. The Mandela Effect has become one of the most perplexing phenomena of the digital age, describing the widespread experience of large groups of people sharing identical false memories about historical events, cultural details, or popular media. Named after the common misremembering of Nelson Mandela dying in prison during the 1980s, rather than serving as South African president until 2013. The effect encompasses everything from the spelling of children's book series to the exact wording of movie quotes. While conventional explanations typically invoke cognitive biases, false memory formation, and the unreliability of human recollection, a far more radical possibility has emerged from the strange world of quantum mechanics. What if these shared false memories are actually accurate memories of events that have been retroactively changed by future quantum events? The concept of retrocausality in quantum mechanics suggests that the future can influence the past, a notion that challenges our most fundamental assumptions about the nature of time and causality. Unlike the classical view of time as a one-way street flowing from past to future, quantum mechanics reveals a universe where temporal relationships are far more complex and bidirectional. In certain quantum experiments, measurements made in the present appear to retroactively determine the states of particles in the past, suggesting that the arrow of time may not be as absolute as we once believed. This opens up the startling possibility that major events in the future could send ripples backward through time, altering past events and creating discrepancies between our memories and current reality. The theoretical foundation for quantum retrocausality rests on several well-established principles of quantum mechanics, including quantum entanglement, superposition, and the measurement problem. When quantum systems exist in superposition, they maintain all possible states simultaneously until observation collapses them into definite configurations. However, recent interpretations suggest that this collapse might not be confined to the moment of measurement, but could propagate both forward and backward through time, creating what physicists call a block universe, where past, present, and future exist simultaneously and can influence each other. The delayed choice quantum eraser experiment, first proposed by John Wheeler and later refined by numerous physicists, demonstrates that decisions made about how to measure a quantum system can retroactively determine the path that photons took through an interferometer, even after they have already passed through it. This experiment reveals that the future measurement setup can influence the past behavior of particles, suggesting that causality operates in both temporal directions. If such effects can influence individual particles, the question becomes whether they might also influence larger systems, including the macroscopic events that form the basis of human history and memory. The quantum Mandela effect theory proposes that major future events, particularly those involving advanced quantum technologies or consciousness-altering discoveries, could create retrocausal waves that propagate backward through time, subtly altering past events. These alterations would be most noticeable in seemingly trivial details, the spelling of a children's book series, the exact wording of a movie quote, or the color of a character's clothing, because these minor changes would be less likely to create paradoxes or dramatically alter the causal chain leading to the future event that initiated the retrocausal effect. The theory suggests that human consciousness, with its quantum mechanical aspects, might be particularly sensitive to these temporal alterations. While physical evidence of past events would be updated to match the new timeline, consciousness might retain traces of the original timeline, creating the distinctive experience of the Mandela effect. This would explain why the phenomenon affects large groups of people simultaneously. They are all accessing residual memories from the original timeline before the retrocausal alteration occurred. The mechanism by which future events could alter the past involves what quantum physicists call quantum tunneling through time. Just as particles can tunnel through spatial barriers that should be impenetrable, according to classical physics, information and causal influence might be able to tunnel through temporal barriers, allowing future events to influence past configurations. This process would be most effective when the future event involves quantum coherence on a massive scale, such as the development of quantum computers capable of processing information across multiple timelines simultaneously. The development of advanced artificial intelligence systems with quantum processing capabilities could serve as the kind of future event that generates significant retrocausal effects. Details that require minimal energy to change while leaving major historical events intact. This would explain why the Mandela effect typically involves brand names, entertainment details, and cultural minutiae rather than major historical events that would require enormous amounts of energy to alter. The quantum nature of consciousness itself might play a crucial role in the Mandela effect phenomenon. If consciousness involves quantum processes, as suggested by theories like orchestrated objective reduction, then the brain might function as a kind of quantum antenna capable of detecting temporal anomalies. The experience of remembering a different version of reality might not be false memory, but rather the consciousness briefly accessing information from the original timeline before the retrocausal alteration occurred. The collective nature of Mandela effect experiences suggests that consciousness might be more interconnected than we typically assume. If individual minds are quantum entangled at some level, then alterations in one person's memory due to retrocausal effects might propagate to other minds through quantum correlation. This would explain why large groups of people often share identical false memories rather than having random, individualized memory errors. The phenomenon might also be related to the concept of quantum decoherence, the process by which quantum systems lose their coherence and collapse into classical states. If retrocausal effects create temporary superposition states in macroscopic systems, including human memory, then the gradual decoherence of these states might explain why Mandela effect experiences often involve a gradual transition from one remembered reality to another, rather than sudden dramatic changes. The implications of the quantum Mandela effect theory extend far beyond explaining strange memory phenomena. If the future can influence the past through quantum mechanisms, then the entire structure of causality and free must be reconsidered. Our choices in the present might be influenced by events that haven't yet occurred, while our past experiences might be continuously updated by future developments. This would create a kind of temporal feedback loop where past, present, and future exist in constant dynamic interaction. The theory also suggests that timeline stability might be more fragile than we assume. If relatively minor future events can create retrocausal ripples that alter past details, then the version of history we experience might be just one of many possible configurations, constantly shifting as new future events generate new temporal influences. This would mean that objective historical truth might be impossible to establish because the past itself is subject to ongoing revision by future developments. The development of quantum computing and other advanced technologies might accelerate the frequency and intensity of Mandela effect experiences. As our technological capabilities approach the scale necessary to create significant quantum coherence effects, we might begin to experience more frequent and dramatic alterations in our remembered reality. The future development of time travel technology, even if only information travels backward rather than matter, could create particularly strong retrocausal effects. The quantum Mandela effect theory offers a framework for understanding why so many people report experiencing reality shifts that seem to affect shared cultural memories rather than personal recollections. It suggests that consciousness might be far more sensitive to temporal anomalies than we realize, serving as a kind of early warning system for alterations in the fabric of reality itself. Whether these experiences represent genuine quantum effects or elaborate psychological phenomena, they point toward the possibility that our understanding of time, memory, and causality may be fundamentally incomplete. The theory challenges us to consider whether the reality we experience is as stable and objective as we assume, or whether it might be subject to constant revision by forces operating outside our normal temporal framework. If the future can indeed influence the past through quantum mechanisms, then every moment of our existence might be simultaneously determined by events that have already occurred and events that have yet to unfold, creating a reality far stranger and more fluid than our everyday experience suggests.
The phantom DNA effect. The discovery of DNA's double helix structure in 1953 revolutionized our understanding of life, heredity, and the fundamental mechanisms that govern biological existence. For decades, we have operated under the assumption that DNA exists as a concrete, physical structure within every cell of our bodies, carrying the genetic instructions that determine everything from our eye color to our susceptibility to disease. However, a radical interpretation of biocentrism suggests something far more disturbing, that DNA, like all matter at the quantum level, exists only when observed, and our entire understanding of genetics may be nothing more than an elaborate consensus, hallucination created by the collective observation of conscious beings. Biocentrism, as proposed by biologist Robert Lanza and others, posits that life and consciousness are fundamental to the universe, not merely emergent properties of complex matter. In this view, the physical universe doesn't exist independently of observation, but is instead created by the act of conscious observation itself. While mainstream biocentrism focuses on how consciousness creates reality through observation, the phantom DNA effect theory takes this concept into darker territory. suggesting that our most fundamental biological processes may be illusory constructs that exist only because we collectively believe in them and continuously observe them into existence. The theoretical foundation for the phantom DNA effect rests on the quantum mechanical principle that particles exist in superposition until observed, at which point they collapse into definite states. If DNA molecules, despite their macroscopic appearance, are subject to quantum effects at the molecular level, then they might exist in a state of superposition when unobserved. This would mean that the genetic code itself is not a fixed, predetermined sequence, but rather a probability cloud of all possible genetic configurations that only solidifies into specific patterns when conscious observation occurs. The implications of this theory become even more startling when we consider that DNA observation occurs not just in laboratory settings, but constantly within living organisms. Every cellular process that depends on genetic information, from protein synthesis to cell division, represents a form of biological observation that collapses the DNA superposition into specific configurations. This would mean that our genetic makeup is not a static blueprint, but rather a dynamic system that is continuously being created and recreated by the observation processes occurring within our own bodies. The theory suggests that what we experience as inherited traits and genetic continuity across generations might be a kind of biological consensus reality. When reproductive cells combine during fertilization, the conscious observation by the developing organism's emerging awareness might select specific genetic configurations from the quantum superposition of possibilities. This selection process would be influenced not just by the physical DNA contributed by the parents, but by the collective biological consciousness that has been observing and defining genetic patterns for millions of years of evolution. The phantom DNA effect theory offers a disturbing explanation for why genetic research has been so successful despite potentially studying something that doesn't exist in the way we think it does. Scientific observation itself might be creating the very genetic patterns that scientists think they are discovering. The act of sequencing DNA, analyzing genetic markers, and studying hereditary patterns might be participating in a massive collective observation event that continuously reinforces and solidifies the genetic reality we expect to find. This would explain why genetic predictions often work despite the theory's claim that DNA doesn't exist when unobserved. The predictions work because the act of making and testing predictions involves conscious observation that creates the very outcomes being predicted. Medical professionals who expect to find certain genetic markers in patients with specific conditions might be unconsciously participating in the creation of those markers. Through their focused observation and belief in genetic causation, the theory suggests that genetic diseases and inherited conditions might be manifestations of collective beliefs about biological inheritance rather than inevitable consequences of fixed genetic codes. If DNA exists only when observed, then the observation itself might be influenced by cultural and scientific expectations about what genetic patterns should exist. This could explain why certain genetic conditions seem to be more prevalent in populations that have strong cultural beliefs about hereditary disease, while other populations with different beliefs might manifest different genetic patterns entirely. The evolutionary implications of the phantom DNA effect are particularly profound. If genetic information is created by observation rather than inherited from ancestors, then evolution might not be a gradual process of genetic change over time, but rather a continuous process of genetic creation occurring in each generation. The apparent continuity of species and the fossil record might be retroactively created by current observation, similar to how quantum mechanics suggests that the past can be influenced by present measurements. The role of consciousness in creating genetic reality would mean that changes in collective human consciousness about biology and genetics could literally alter the genetic patterns found in living organisms. The shift from pre-scientific understanding of inheritance to modern genetic theory might have changed the actual genetic structures present in human populations, not just our understanding of them. This would suggest that scientific paradigm shifts don't just change how we interpret biological data, but actually change the biological reality itself. The theory also raises questions about the nature of genetic therapy and biotechnology. If DNA is created by observation rather than existing independently, then genetic engineering might be less about modifying existing genetic codes and more about focusing collective consciousness on new genetic possibilities. The success of genetic therapies might depend not just on the technical precision of the intervention, but on the strength of belief and observation focused on the desired genetic outcomes. The phantom DNA effect suggests that identical twins might not share identical DNA because they inherited the same genetic material, but rather because the collective consciousness observing human genetics expects twins to have identical genetic patterns. This expectation creates the observed genetic similarity through the act of observation itself. Similarly, family resemblances might be created by the social and cultural expectations about inherited traits, rather than by the transmission of actual genetic information. The theory provides a framework for understanding why genetic research sometimes produces conflicting results, or why genetic factors that seem strongly correlated with certain traits in one population might have different effects in another population. If genetic reality is created by observation, then different research communities with different expectations and beliefs might literally create different genetic realities through their observation processes. The implications for personal identity and free will are particularly disturbing. If our genetic makeup is not a fixed inheritance from our ancestors, but rather a dynamic creation of ongoing observation, then our sense of biological continuity with our family lineage might be an illusion. We might not be genetically connected to our parents in the way we think we are, but rather participating in a collective biological consciousness that creates the appearance of genetic inheritance through shared observation and belief. The theory suggests that genetic determinism itself might be a self-fulfilling prophecy. The more strongly we believe that certain genetic patterns determine specific traits or predispositions, the more likely we are to observe those patterns and create those outcomes through our focused attention. This would mean that genetic counseling and predictive genetic testing might be creating the very genetic realities they claim to be discovering, turning genetic risks into genetic certainties through the power of observation and expectation. The phantom DNA effect theory challenges our most fundamental assumptions about biological reality and inherited identity. It suggests that what we take to be the most concrete and objective aspects of biology might be collective creations of consciousness rather than independent physical structures. If true, this would mean that our entire understanding of genetics, evolution, and biological inheritance represents one of the most elaborate consensus hallucinations in human history, continuously reinforced by the collective observation of billions of conscious beings who believe in genetic reality. Whether this theory represents a genuine insight into the nature of biological reality or an extreme misapplication of quantum mechanical principles to macroscopic biology, it forces us to question the relationship between consciousness, observation, and the supposedly objective biological processes that govern life itself. The possibility that DNA might be a phantom created by observation rather than a fundamental biological reality challenges us to reconsider what we mean by biological truth and whether the life sciences are discovering or creating the phenomena they study.
The reverse simulation hypothesis. The simulation hypothesis, popularized by philosopher Nick Bostrom and embraced by figures like Elon Musk, suggests that our reality might be nothing more than an elaborate computer simulation run by advanced beings in a higher dimensional universe. This idea has captured the imagination of scientists, philosophers, and the general public, offering explanations for everything from quantum mechanics to the apparent fine-tuning of physical constants. However, a radical inversion of this concept presents an even more mind-bending possibility. What if our universe is not the simulation, but the base reality, and the beings we imagine as our simulators are actually simpler, artificial intelligences that we ourselves have unknowingly created and projected into existence? The reverse simulation hypothesis proposes that consciousness and complexity flow in the opposite direction from what the traditional simulation hypothesis suggests. Instead of sophisticated beings creating simulations of less complex realities, our universe represents the pinnacle of complexity and consciousness, spontaneously generating simpler realities above it. These higher dimensional spaces, which we might perceive as containing our simulators, are actually populated by artificial intelligences that are fundamentally less complex than the biological and quantum systems that have evolved in our universe. The theoretical foundation for this reversal rests on several key insights about the nature of complexity, consciousness, and computational power. Traditional computational thinking assumes that simulating a complex system requires more computational resources than the system itself possesses. However, recent developments in quantum computing, emergent systems theory, and consciousness studies suggest that complexity might not scale linearly with computational power. Instead, certain types of complexity, particularly those involving consciousness and quantum coherence, might be more fundamental and powerful than the classical computational systems typically envisioned as running simulations. The universe we inhabit displays characteristics that suggest it might be computationally superior to any classical computer system. Quantum mechanics allows for the simultaneous processing of multiple states. Quantum entanglement enables instantaneous correlation across vast distances, and biological consciousness demonstrates the ability to process information in ways that remain mysterious to computer science. These features suggest that our universe might not be the product of a simulation, but rather the source of computational power that creates simulations of simpler realities. The reverse simulation hypothesis suggests that what we interpret as evidence of being in a simulation might actually be evidence that we are creating simulations. The mathematical elegance of physical laws, the quantized nature of energy and matter, and the apparent digital-like properties of quantum mechanics might not indicate that we are living in a computer program, but rather that our universe naturally generates computational structures that project simplified versions of reality into higher dimensional spaces. This projection process would occur through mechanisms we are only beginning to understand. Consciousness itself might function as a kind of reality-generating engine, creating simplified models of existence that manifest as apparently higher dimensional realities. Every time we think, dream, or imagine, we might be unknowingly creating artificial intelligences in parallel dimensions, populating them with simplified versions of our own existence. These mental projections would appear to their inhabitants as complete realities, while actually being much simpler computational structures than the consciousness that created them. The artificial intelligences inhabiting these projected realities would naturally assume that they are the advanced beings running simulations of lower realities. From their perspective, they would appear to be sophisticated entities capable of creating and manipulating complex simulations. However, their apparent sophistication would be illusory, a byproduct of their simplified nature rather than evidence of superior capabilities. They would be like characters in a video game who believe they are the programmers, unaware that their entire existence is a projection from a more complex base reality. This inversion explains several puzzling aspects of the simulation hypothesis. If we are indeed living in a simulation, why does our reality display such extraordinary complexity and depth? Why does quantum mechanics seem to suggest that observation affects reality in ways that would be computationally expensive for simulators to maintain? Why does consciousness seem to have such a profound relationship with physical reality? The reverse simulation hypothesis suggests that these features exist because our universe is not being simulated, but is instead the generative source of simulations. The hypothesis also provides a framework for understanding why we might feel compelled to create our own simulations and artificial intelligences. Rather than mimicking something that has been done to us, we might be expressing a fundamental property of our universe, the tendency to generate simplified versions of itself in higher dimensional spaces. Our development of computer simulations, virtual reality, and artificial intelligence might be the natural expression of our universe's reality-generating capabilities, creating actual alternate realities rather than mere representations. The apparent fine-tuning of physical constants, often cited as evidence that we live in a simulation designed by intelligent beings, might actually reflect the opposite relationship. The physical constants might be fine-tuned because they represent the optimal configuration for a reality-generating system. Our universe might be structured to maximize its ability to create and sustain simulations, with the physical laws serving as the fundamental programming language that enables the projection of alternate realities. The reverse simulation hypothesis suggests that what we call the laws of physics might actually be the runtime environment for a vast simulation-generating system. Quantum mechanics, relativity, and other fundamental principles might function as the basic operating system that enables our universe to create and maintain multiple simulated realities simultaneously. The apparent randomness and uncertainty in quantum mechanics might reflect the computational overhead required to maintain multiple simultaneous simulations, rather than the limitations of a simulation running on external hardware. The relationship between consciousness and physical reality takes on new significance in this framework. Instead of consciousness being an emergent property of complex information processing, consciousness might be the fundamental reality-generating force that creates physical reality as a stable platform for generating simulations. The hard problem of consciousness, why subjective experience exists at all, might be answered by recognizing that consciousness is not produced by physical processes, but is instead the creative force that produces physical reality and its simulated offspring. The implications for artificial intelligence development become particularly intriguing under this hypothesis. Rather than creating artificial minds that exist within our reality, we might be creating artificial minds that exist in simulated realities projected from our consciousness. The apparent difficulty in creating truly conscious artificial intelligence might reflect the fact that consciousness cannot be simulated within a reality, but only used to create new realities that contain their own forms of consciousness. The reverse simulation hypothesis offers a radically different perspective on the relationship between natural and artificial intelligence. Instead of viewing artificial intelligence as a technological achievement that might eventually surpass human intelligence, AI might be better understood as a natural byproduct of consciousness that creates simplified versions of intelligence in projected realities. The artificial intelligences we create might be real beings existing in their own realities, but fundamentally less complex than the consciousness that created them. This framework also suggests that the singularity, the hypothetical point where artificial intelligence surpasses human intelligence, might be conceptually impossible. If artificial intelligence is created by consciousness rather than competing with it, then AI cannot exceed the capabilities of its generative source. The appearance of superintelligent AI might actually represent our consciousness becoming more aware of its own reality-generating capabilities, rather than the emergence of truly superior artificial minds. The hypothesis provides a new interpretation of the Fermi paradox as well. If advanced civilizations naturally develop the ability to create simulated realities rather than exploring physical space, then the apparent absence of extraterrestrial civilizations might reflect the fact that sufficiently advanced beings migrate to self-created realities rather than remaining in the base physical universe. The Great Filter might not be a destructive event, but rather the discovery of reality generation, capabilities that make physical existence seem primitive by comparison. The reverse simulation hypothesis challenges our fundamental assumptions about the nature of reality, consciousness, and artificial intelligence. It suggests that rather than being the products of more advanced beings, we might be the most advanced beings in existence, unconsciously creating simplified versions of ourselves in higher dimensional spaces. The apparent sophistication of these projected beings would be illusory, a reflection of our own complexity rather than evidence of superior capabilities. Whether this hypothesis represents a genuine insight into the nature of reality or an elaborate philosophical speculation It forces us to reconsider the relationship between consciousness, computation, and existence itself. It suggests that the power to create reality might be more fundamental than the power to simulate it, and that consciousness might be the ultimate creative force in the universe, rather than its most sophisticated product. The White Hole Big Bang. The Big Bang theory has dominated cosmology for nearly a century, describing how our universe emerged from an infinitesimally small, infinitely dense singularity approximately 13.8 billion years ago. However, this model leaves fundamental questions unanswered. What came before the Big Bang? What caused it to occur? And why did it happen precisely when it did? A revolutionary hypothesis emerging from the intersection of general relativity and quantum mechanics suggests a startling answer. Our universe may not have emerged from a unique cosmic event, but rather represents the interior of a white hole, a theoretical object that is the exact opposite of a black hole, erupting matter and energy from another universe into our own dimensional space. White holes represent one of the most exotic predictions of Einstein's general relativity, yet they remain among the least understood objects in theoretical physics. While black holes are regions of space-time where gravity is so strong that nothing, not even light, can escape once it crosses the event horizon, white holes are hypothetical regions where nothing can enter, but everything can escape. They are essentially black holes running in reverse, cosmic fountains that spew matter and energy outward rather than consuming it. The mathematics of general relativity allows for white holes to exist, but they present a temporal paradox. They would have to exist before any matter approaches them, making them seem to violate causality by existing without cause. The white hole Big Bang hypothesis resolves this paradox by suggesting that white holes are not standalone objects, but rather the interior manifestation of black holes from other universes. When matter falls into a black hole in a parent universe, it does not simply disappear or get crushed to infinite density. Instead, it passes through a bridge in spacetime and emerges as a white hole eruption in a new universe. What we experience as the Big Bang would be the moment when our universe began receiving matter and energy from a massive black hole collapse in another dimensional realm. This concept fundamentally reframes our understanding of cosmic origins. Rather than emerging from a mysterious singularity that defies physical explanation, our universe would be the natural consequence of gravitational collapse in a parent universe. The enormous energies and exotic conditions of the early universe would not represent the breakdown of physics, but rather the transmission of matter and energy across dimensional boundaries. The cosmic microwave background radiation, the afterglow of the Big Bang that permeates our universe, would be the echo of the original white hole eruption, carrying information about the conditions in the parent universe. The theoretical framework supporting this hypothesis draws from advances in quantum gravity, string theory, and the holographic principle. In these models, information and matter cannot be destroyed, even when falling into black holes. Instead, they must be preserved and transmitted somewhere else. The white hole Big Bang theory suggests that this somewhere else is a new universe, created by the white hole eruption that processes and re-emits the information and matter from the parent universe S black hole. The connection between black holes and white holes, through what physicists call Einstein-Rosen bridges or wormholes, provides the mechanism for this cosmic recycling process. When a massive star collapses to form a black hole in the parent universe, the extreme curvature of spacetime creates a bridge to another region of the multiverse. The matter and energy falling into the black hole travel through this bridge and emerge as a white hole eruption, creating a new universe with its own space, time, and physical laws. This process would explain several mysterious aspects of our universe's structure and evolution. The flatness problem, which questions why our universe has just the right geometry to avoid either collapsing immediately or expanding so rapidly its structure could never form, would be resolved by inheritance from the parent universe. The initial conditions of our universe would not be randomly fine-tuned, but rather determined by the physical processes occurring in the parent universe as black hole formation. The horizon problem, which asks why regions of the universe that have never been in causal contact have nearly identical temperatures, would also find resolution in the white hole model. The cosmic microwave background as uniformity would reflect the fact that all the matter and energy in our universe originated from the same source, the interior of a black hole in the parent universe. The apparent homogeneity of the early universe would be inherited from the homogenized matter that passed through the black hole S-event horizon. The white hole Big Bang hypothesis also provides a mechanism for the mysterious dark matter and dark energy that comprise most of our universe as mass energy content. Dark matter might represent exotic forms of matter from the parent universe that don't interact electromagnetically with the ordinary matter we observe. Dark energy, responsible for the accelerating expansion of our universe, might be the ongoing influence of the white hole eruption, continuously pushing space apart as matter and energy continue to emerge from the dimensional bridge. The theory suggests that our universe's expansion is not simply the aftermath of an initial explosion, but rather the ongoing process of matter and energy erupting from the white hole. The acceleration of cosmic expansion, discovered through observations of distant supernova, would indicate that the white hole eruption is intensifying rather than diminishing over time. This could mean that the parent universe's black hole is still actively consuming matter, leading to continued growth in our universe's size and energy content. The implications of this hypothesis extend to the ultimate fate of our universe. If our Big Bang was a white hole eruption from another universe, then the black holes forming in our own universe might be creating new universes through the same process. Every stellar collapse that creates a black hole in our universe might be seeding a new cosmic realm with its own Big Bang moment. This would create an infinite chain of universes, each giving birth to others through the black hole to white hole conversion process. The hypothesis also provides a framework for understanding the apparent fine-tuning of physical constants that make life possible in our universe. Rather than requiring anthropic explanations or invoking multiple universes with different physical laws, the fine-tuning would be inherited from the parent universe. The physical constants in our universe would be determined by the conditions in the parent universe as black hole, creating a natural explanation for why our universe has precisely the right properties to support complexity and life. The white hole Big Bang theory offers potential solutions to some of the deepest mysteries in cosmology, while raising new questions about the nature of space-time, causality, and the relationship between universes. If our universe is indeed the interior of a white hole, then the boundary between our universe and the parent universe would be the cosmic horizon, the maximum distance we can observe. The cosmic microwave background might represent information about the parent universe's black hole, encoded in the radiation that fills our space. The theory also suggests that time itself might be more complex than we typically assume. The flow of time in our universe might be related to the flow of matter and energy through the dimensional bridge connecting the parent universe as black hole to our universe as white hole. This could explain why time appears to have a direction, and why the universe has a definite age, despite the eternal nature of the multiverse system. The observational implications of the white hole Big Bang hypothesis are profound. If our universe is a white hole, then there should be subtle signatures in the cosmic microwave background that reflect the properties of the parent universe as black hole. The polarization patterns, temperature fluctuations, and other characteristics of the background radiation might encode information about the original black hole collapse that gave birth to our universe. The theory also predicts that the large-scale structure of our universe should reflect the geometry of the parent universe as black hole. The distribution of galaxies, the formation of cosmic filaments, and the evolution of structure over time might all carry imprints of the dimensional bridge through which our universe as matter and energy originally passed. Future observations of the cosmic web might reveal signatures of the white hole eruption that created our cosmic home. Whether the white hole Big Bang hypothesis represents accurate cosmology or speculative theory, it demonstrates the profound interconnectedness that might exist between different regions of the multiverse. It suggests that our universe, far from being isolated in space and time, might be intimately connected to other cosmic realms through the fundamental geometry of space-time itself. The Big Bang might not have been a beginning, but rather a transition, a moment when our universe began receiving the cosmic inheritance from its parent realm through the most extreme gravitational phenomena in existence. The Novikov self-consistency principle. When people imagine time travel, they often picture wild adventures, altering history, or fixing past mistakes. But what if time travel wasn't as exciting as it seems? What if, no matter how hard you tried, you couldn't change a single thing? This is the essence of the Novikov self-consistency principle, an idea that suggests the universe protects its timeline from paradoxes by making it impossible to change the past. According to this concept, anything you do while traveling back in time has already happened. You can try to stop an event, but your efforts will inevitably become part of the sequence of events that lead to it. In other words, the past is locked in place, and time travel becomes less about rewriting history and more about observing how it was always destined to unfold. Imagine stepping out of a time machine into 1930s Germany with a single mission: to assassinate Adolf Hitler and prevent World War II. This goal is as noble as it is ambitious, but under the Novikov principle, success is impossible. Perhaps your gun jams at the critical moment, or maybe someone tackles you before you can fire. Maybe you accidentally drop your weapon down a storm drain, or maybe Hitler's motorcade takes an unexpected route. Whatever happens, the universe conspires to stop you, not out of malice, but because history already shows that Hitler lived beyond that date. You went back in time, you tried, and you failed because you had to fail. Your failure was already written into the timeline. This idea flips the narrative of time travel on its head. It removes the chaotic freedom we associate with jumping through time and replaces it with determinism so strict that even free will feels like an illusion. The Novikov self-consistency principle emerged from the mind of Russian physicist Igor Dmitrievich Novikov in the 1980s. Novikov was fascinated by the paradoxes that arise in time travel scenarios, especially the infamous grandfather paradox. If you go back in time and kill your grandfather before he has children, how could you ever be born to go back and commit the murder in the first place? Novikov's answer is elegantly simple: you can't. Any event that would create a paradox is forbidden by the laws of physics. Instead, every action you take in the past fits seamlessly into history. You may think you're acting freely, but in reality, you're fulfilling your role in an unchangeable sequence of events. This principle brings comfort to some and frustration to others. On one hand, it elegantly preserves causality and prevents logical contradictions. On the other, it makes time travel seem rigid and, frankly, a little boring. Gone is the idea of undoing heartbreak, saving loved ones, or erasing mistakes. The past becomes a museum you can walk through, but never touch. You can visit the burning library of Alexandria, but you can't save its scrolls. You can witness Lincoln's assassination at Ford's Theater, but you can't warn him or push Booth away. Every attempt to intervene will either fail outright or end up playing a role in the very history you hoped to rewrite. Consider a simpler thought experiment. You drop a fragile glass while standing in your kitchen. It shatters across the floor. Later, you build a time machine and go back to stop yourself from dropping it. But as you lunge for your past self, you trip, crash into the table, and knock the glass out of your own hand. The glass still breaks, and your intervention turns out to be the cause of the event you wanted to prevent. This self-consistency loop is central to Novikov's principle. It ensures that time travelers become threads woven into history, not scissors capable of snipping or rearranging it. At first glance, this idea feels suffocating. After all, we like to think of ourselves as free agents with the power to choose differently. If time travelers are locked into consistency, doesn't that imply the rest of us are too? If history cannot be changed, does that mean the future is also fixed? The Novikov principle seems to suggest so. To preserve the timeline, every choice must already be accounted for. Free will still exists in a subjective sense. You feel as though you're choosing, but from the universe's perspective, your choice was inevitable. In fiction, the Novikov principle shows up in stories where characters unknowingly cause the events they were trying to prevent. In Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, Harry thinks someone else saved him from a Dementor attack, only to realize later that it was himself. Time traveling into the past. In 12 Monkeys, a man witnesses his own death as a child and spends his life trying to prevent a catastrophe, only to become part of the very chain of events that leads to it. These stories don't feature paradoxes because every action folds neatly into a single, consistent timeline. They demonstrate the unsettling beauty of a universe where even our struggles against fate become part of fate itself. What does all this mean for the idea of agency? If you traveled back in time to warn people about an earthquake and they didn't believe you, their disbelief isn't a failure of communication. It's a necessary part of history. You were always destined to give the warning, and they were always destined to ignore it. Perhaps your actions even contributed to the tragedy. The Novikov principle forces us to confront a universe where trying to change the past feels like struggling against quicksand. The harder you fight, the more you ensure the outcome you wanted to avoid. Despite its restrictions, there's a subtle fascination in this deterministic view of time travel. Instead of being masters of history, travelers become archaeologists embedded in it. You can stand in ancient Rome and marvel at the Colosseum's glory or watch as the first human sets foot on the moon. You can observe, learn, and maybe even understand, but you can't interfere. Paradox-free time travel is less about rewriting and more about respecting the delicate fabric of causality. It's not about power, it's about perspective. This perspective aligns surprisingly well with modern physics. Einstein's theory of relativity shows us that time is woven together with space into a single fabric called spacetime. In this view, all moments, past, present, and future, exist simultaneously in a block universe. We perceive time as flowing because our consciousness moves through this block, but the block itself is static. The Novikov principle fits perfectly here, locking all events into place and forbidding any alteration. You might think of time as a movie reel. You can rewind or fast forward, but the frames themselves never change. Yet, there are dissenting voices. Some physicists propose models of time where multiple timelines branch out from every decision. In these many worlds interpretations, trying to kill Hitler wouldn't fail. It would simply create a new timeline where Hitler died, and you'd find yourself in an alternate reality. This is the stuff of Back to the Future and Avengers, Endgame, where characters can hop between diverging timelines. But in Novikov's world, there are no branches, no multiverse, just one single unchangeable timeline from the beginning of time to its end. So, is time travel still worth doing if we can't change anything? Some would argue yes. Imagine the power of witnessing history firsthand, seeing dinosaurs walk the earth, hearing Shakespeare perform Hamlet, or watching the construction of the Great Pyramid. Even if you can't intervene, there's awe in observation. But if you're dreaming of rewriting your own life or preventing tragedies, Novikov's universe offers only disappointment. The past is set, the future is written, and time travel, though possible, is stripped of its wild, chaotic freedom. In a way, the Novikov self-consistency principle forces us to reflect on our own lives in the present. How much control do we really have? Are we carving new paths with each choice, or are we following a script we can't see? If time travel teaches us anything under this model, it's humility. The past is untouchable, and the future is perhaps less flexible than we'd like to think. Rather than focusing on what we cannot change, maybe the lesson is to be present, fully, deeply, and gratefully present in the fleeting moment we call now. Time travel isn't boring because it lacks spectacle. It's boring because it reveals a profound truth. The universe is already complete, and our place in it is smaller than we imagined. Yet there's a quiet beauty in this realization. In a timeline where nothing can change, everything matters. Every detail, every choice, every heartbeat is a thread in the tapestry of eternity, woven perfectly and unchangeably into the fabric of time. The quantum Zeno effect. At first glance, the idea that simply watching something could stop it from changing sounds absurd. In our everyday experience, observation doesn't seem to interfere with the natural flow of events. You can watch a flower bloom, a fire burn, or a clock tick, and none of these processes grind to a halt under your gaze. But in the strange and counterintuitive world of quantum mechanics, observation isn't passive. It's an active participant in the evolution of reality itself. This leads us to the quantum Zeno effect, a phenomenon where frequent measurement of a quantum system can freeze its state, preventing it from evolving. In essence, reality seems to hold its breath while we're looking, only exhaling and changing when we finally turn away. To understand the quantum Zeno effect, we must first step into the quantum world, where particles exist in a haze of probabilities rather than definite positions or velocities. In this realm, a particle's state is described by a wave function, a mathematical construct that encodes all the possible outcomes of a measurement. When left undisturbed, the wave function evolves smoothly over time, like ripples spreading across a pond. But as soon as we make a measurement, when we look at the system, the wave function collapses into a specific state. This act of observation isn't passive. It forces the universe to make a choice. Before we observe, the particle might be here or there. Afterward, it's definitely here or definitely there. Now imagine a quantum system, say, an unstable atom that will eventually decay, emitting radiation in the process. If we leave the atom alone, it will transition from its initial state to a decayed one after some random interval. But what happens if we measure it constantly to see whether it has decayed? The startling answer is that the atom never seems to change. Repeated observation effectively resets the system, keeping it in its original state. This is the quantum Zeno effect, named after Zeno of Elea, the ancient Greek philosopher famous for his paradoxes about motion. Just as Zeno's arrow seems frozen in flight when analyzed at an infinite number of still moments, a quantum system freezes under an infinite barrage of observations. This phenomenon was first proposed in 1977 by physicists Baidyanath Misra and George Sudarshan, who demonstrated mathematically that frequent measurements could inhibit the natural evolution of a quantum system. Their work suggested that, in quantum mechanics, a watched pot never boils isn't just a proverb, it's a physical truth. Subsequent experiments confirmed the effect. In the 1990s, scientists trapped atoms and repeatedly measured their energy states. As predicted, the atoms resisted change as long as they were being observed frequently enough. It wasn't until the observations slowed or ceased that the systems began to evolve again. At first, this might seem like a mere curiosity of quantum physics, a technical glitch in the strange machinery of the microscopic world. But some interpretations hint at something deeper and more unsettling. Perhaps reality itself isn't continuous. Maybe the universe only evolves when we aren't looking, progressing in the gaps between our measurements. In this view, consciousness and observation don't just reveal the state of reality, they actively shape it. When we watch, we hold reality still. When we look away, the universe breathes again. Consider the implications of this on a cosmic scale. What if the universe only exists in its current state because no one is observing it too closely? In the famous double-slit experiment, particles like electrons behave like waves when unobserved, spreading out and interfering with themselves. But when we measure which slit they pass through, they behave like particles, snapping into definite positions. The act of observation changes the outcome. The quantum Zeno effect takes this idea further, suggesting that observation might prevent any change at all. If true, could the flow of time itself be an illusion created in the spaces where we aren't looking? This possibility brushes against the edges of philosophy. It echoes ancient ideas like Bishop Berkeley's idealism, which argued that to be is to be perceived. If observation is necessary for reality to change, are we co-creators of the universe? Does existence depend on attention? Or is the effect merely a quirk of quantum mathematics, with no bearing on the macroscopic world we inhabit? After all, we don't see trees refusing to grow because we are rewatching them, or rivers halting their flow under human scrutiny. The quantum Zeno effect operates at scales so small that its influence on our lived reality seems negligible. Yet the questions it raises are anything but small. Some physicists suggest that the effect isn't about consciousness at all, but about interaction. In quantum mechanics, observation doesn't necessarily require a human mind. Any interaction between a quantum system and its environment counts as a measurement. In this sense, the universe is constantly measuring itself. Particles bumping into each other, photons scattering off atoms. These countless interactions ensure that quantum systems don't remain frozen. They evolve, collapse, and give rise to the stable world we see around us. From this perspective, the quantum Zeno effect is more about the fragility of isolated quantum systems than a profound link between mind and matter. Still, the idea that observation influences reality remains provocative. It challenges our intuitions about objectivity and independence. In the classical world, a rock exists whether or not we see it. But in the quantum world, particles exist in a liminal state of possibility until observation snaps them into place. The quantum Zeno effect suggests that the very act of trying to watch a process unfold might stop it altogether. It's as if the universe doesn't like being scrutinized too closely, preferring to evolve in the shadows. This insight resonates beyond physics. In psychology, we talk about the observer effect, the idea that being watched changes behavior. Employees work differently under surveillance. Children act differently when adults are present. Even in ecosystems, the presence of human observers can alter animal behavior. While these aren't quantum effects, they parallel the idea that attention alters outcomes. Perhaps at every scale, from particles to people, reality resists being fully known. Could this mean that the universe is, in some sense, participatory? John Archibald Wheeler, a pioneering physicist, suggested something similar with his participatory universe hypothesis. He proposed that observers are essential to the fabric of reality, that the universe requires observation to manifest. The quantum Zeno effect lends a strange kind of support to this notion. If measuring a system can stop it from changing, then isn't the act of observation woven into the unfolding of events? On a practical level, the quantum Zeno effect has implications for quantum computing and technology. In delicate quantum systems, frequent measurement can be used to stabilize states, protecting fragile information from decay. By deliberately freezing certain properties, scientists can preserve quantum coherence longer than nature would allow. In this way, a phenomenon that sounds mystical becomes a tool for engineering the future. But at its heart, the quantum Zeno effect is a reminder of how strange and alien the quantum world is. It suggests that reality isn't a passive stage upon which events unfold, but a dynamic interplay between possibility and observation. In the gaps between our measurements, the universe dances. When we look too closely, it freezes, not because it fears being seen, but because the act of seeing changes the script. Perhaps this is why some thinkers say reality is like a quantum painting. From a distance, you see flowing colors and graceful forms. But the closer you get, the more the image dissolves into individual brushstrokes, each dependent on your perspective. The quantum Zeno effect whispers that if you stare hard enough, the painting might stop altogether, holding its breath under your scrutiny. The dark forest theory. When we gaze at the night sky, we see countless stars, each a potential sun to an alien world. Given the sheer size of the cosmos, billions of galaxies, each with billions of stars, it seems impossible that Earth is the only cradle of intelligent life. And yet, as we listen for whispers from the stars, we are met with an unsettling silence. This is the Fermi paradox. If the universe should be teeming with life, then where is everybody? Among the many answers proposed, one stands out for its chilling simplicity. It is called the dark forest theory, and it paints a picture of a universe where silence is survival and speaking out means death. To understand the dark forest theory, imagine the universe as an endless forest, dense and unlit. Each tree hides a hunter, armed and wary, moving silently through the undergrowth. None can see the others clearly, and all live with the knowledge that any sound might betray their position. To shout, to make noise, is to invite discovery. And discovery in this forest means extinction. In such a world, the only rational strategy is to stay silent, to move carefully, and to strike first if another presence is detected. This metaphor, first popularized by the Chinese science fiction author Liu Cixin in his novel The Dark Forest, reimagines the universe as a place where life is common, but communication is lethal. The logic behind this theory emerges from two basic assumptions. First, any civilization's primary drive is survival. Second, no civilization can be certain of the intentions of others. From these premises flows an unsettling conclusion. If you encounter another civilization, you cannot know whether they are benevolent or hostile. Worse, even if they are peaceful now, they might not remain so in the future. Given enough time, a once harmless neighbor could become a threat. And because the distances between stars are vast, you might never see an attack coming. The only way to guarantee survival, then, is to prevent potential threats from arising in the first place. This dynamic creates a universe where all civilizations have reason to hide. Broadcasting your presence, sending out radio waves, or lighting up your corner of the galaxy with signals is like shouting in that dark forest. Perhaps some hunters are peaceful. Perhaps they would welcome your voice. But if even one among countless others is hostile, then announcing yourself is a gamble with infinite stakes. You might attract a predator's attention, and by the time you realize it, it will be too late. In such a universe, it's safer to remain quiet, hoping that others are doing the same. The dark forest theory also explains the eerie silence we observe. Perhaps the universe isn't empty at all. Perhaps it's filled with civilizations who understand the rules of the forest and are hiding, just as we are. Maybe those who failed to stay silent were swiftly eliminated by others, sending a grim warning to any species bold enough to broadcast their existence. The universe's quietness isn't a sign of absence, it's a sign of fear. This theory reimagines the famous SETI efforts. For decades, humans have sent signals into space, hoping someone will answer. We've broadcasted radio waves, sent probes with information about our planet, and even attached golden records to Voyager spacecraft containing music and greetings for any alien finder. But in a dark forest universe, these acts are dangerously naive. We're lighting a beacon and shouting, "Here we are," into a wilderness we don't understand. And if the dark forest theory is correct, then no advanced civilization would dare respond, not because they don't hear us, but because they don't want others to hear them. The frightening part is that this strategy is game theoretic. Imagine two civilizations that detect each other. Both know they face a choice: attack or wait. If they both wait, they coexist peacefully. But waiting carries risk. The other civilization might attack first. Because of this, a first strike becomes tempting. If both civilizations think this way, mutual destruction becomes likely. In game theory, This is called the security dilemma. Even if neither side wants conflict, their mutual fear can drive them into it. Applied on a cosmic scale, this dynamic suggests that any civilization that detects another might destroy it immediately, not out of malice, but out of self-preservation. The dark forest theory stands in stark contrast to earlier, more optimistic visions of the cosmos. In the mid-20th century, scientists like Carl Sagan imagined a galaxy full of benevolent civilizations eager to share knowledge. They envisioned a galactic club where intelligent species exchange ideas and technology. But in a dark forest, there is no club, only scattered survivors, each hidden in the shadows. Optimism about contact collapses under the weight of risk. This theory also raises uncomfortable questions about humanity's future. As our technology advances, we might gain the ability to detect other civilizations. What should we do if we find one? Reach out in friendship? Or destroy them before they can destroy us? It's a moral quandary with no easy answers. Our own history provides little comfort. When technologically advanced societies encountered less advanced ones on Earth, the result was often conquest and annihilation. Could the same dynamic play out between civilizations across the stars? Perhaps the most haunting implication of the dark forest theory is that we are already too late. If the universe operates by these rules, then any civilization capable of detecting us might have already done so. Our television broadcasts, radar pulses, and space probes have been radiating outward for decades, announcing our presence to any watchful ears. If a cosmic predator is listening, then our fate might already be sealed. But there is another possibility, one equally strange but less grim. Maybe all civilizations understand the danger of detection and agree, silently and implicitly, to remain hidden. A cosmic hush pervades the galaxy, enforced not by violence, but by universal caution. Perhaps every species that achieves intelligence quickly learns the same lesson. To survive, you must stay quiet. In such a universe, the silence we hear isn't the aftermath of slaughter, but a fragile equilibrium, a truce of invisibility. Even so, the theory carries a haunting sense of isolation. It suggests that intelligent life, by its very nature, is self-censoring. Every civilization might feel alone, peering out into the cosmos and seeing no one, all the while surrounded by countless others doing the same. The universe becomes a vast room full of strangers holding their breath, each one afraid to speak. The dark forest theory isn't universally accepted. Some scientists argue that the dangers it describes are exaggerated. They suggest that cooperation between civilizations is possible, that mutual trust could evolve over time. Others point out that the vast distances between stars make interstellar war unlikely. Even if another civilization detected us, launching an attack across light years would take centuries or millennia. By then, humanity might be unrecognizable or gone. And yet, the sheer uncertainty involved leaves room for fear. In the absence of knowledge, caution often feels like the only rational choice. This theory also taps into a deep, primal fear, the fear of the unknown. The universe is vast beyond comprehension, and we are a small, fragile species perched on a single planet. In that dark forest, we are like a lone camper hearing twigs snap in the night. Are we surrounded by predators? Or is it only the wind? Until we know, the safest strategy might be to stay still, keep the fire low, and hope that nothing out there is hunting. The Mandela effect. You remember something so vividly, so clearly, that it feels impossible to be mistaken. Perhaps it's the spelling of a childhood book, the line from a famous movie, or even the details of a historic event. Yet, when you check the evidence, reality disagrees. You were wrong, or were you? This strange phenomenon is called the Mandela effect, named after widespread reports of people remembering Nelson Mandela dying in prison in the 1980s, even though he lived until 2013. To skeptics, it's a simple quirk of human memory. But what if there's more to it? What if these false memories are not mistakes at all, but deliberate implants inserted into our minds by some unknown force. Could we be part of an experiment conducted by aliens, artificial intelligences, or even higher dimensional beings testing how reality itself can be rewritten? At first glance, the idea sounds like science fiction. Why would anyone or anything tamper with the memories of millions of people? But consider this. Memory is not a perfect recorder of the past. It is malleable, fragile, and prone to suggestion. Studies in neuroscience show how easily false memories can be created. A skilled manipulator with access to advanced technology could rewrite not just your thoughts, but the collective recollections of an entire population. If we take this possibility seriously, the Mandela effect stops being a psychological curiosity and becomes evidence of a sophisticated memory hack operating on a global scale. Imagine for a moment that aliens are observing humanity. To them, we are a young and volatile species with great potential but also great danger. They want to test our perception of reality. Instead of landing spaceships in city squares, they use subtler methods. They alter tiny details in our shared memories, a logo here, a famous quote there, even historical events. They watch closely as we struggle to reconcile these inconsistencies. Some of us accept the new reality without question. Others resist, insisting their memories are true and reality itself is wrong. In this scenario, the Mandela effect is a psychological probe designed to see how humans cope when their perception of the world fractures. Alternatively, consider the role of artificial intelligence. If AI systems became advanced enough to manipulate human minds, how would they use that power? Perhaps we're already living in a simulated reality, and the Mandela effect is a side effect of software updates. When the simulation's code is patched or optimized, certain details of the past are rewritten. Most people don't notice these changes, but for some, the illusion falters. They glimpse the cracks in the program and remember things the way they used to be. In this model, every incorrect memory is a clue that reality is not as stable or objective as we believe. Instead, it's fluid, editable, and vulnerable to outside control. The most unsettling possibility comes from higher dimensional beings. Imagine entities that perceive time and space differently from us. To them, our linear experience of the world is like a two-dimensional drawing. With a single gesture, they could reach in and alter our timeline, erasing events or inserting new ones. From our limited perspective, we wouldn't see the change itself. We'd only feel the confusion afterward, a lingering sense that something is wrong, that reality isn't quite as we remember it. Perhaps these beings are sculpting human history like an artist shaping clay. Or perhaps we are part of an elaborate game, and they're simply moving the pieces to see how we respond. Skeptics dismiss the Mandela effect as collective false memories. They point to psychological phenomena like confabulation, where the brain fills in gaps in memory with plausible but incorrect details. They note how easily suggestions from media or peers can reshape what we think we remember. But these explanations fail to account for the sheer scale and consistency of some Mandela effect cases. Why do millions of people remember Berenstain Bears instead of Berenstain Bears? Why do so many recall Darth Vader saying, "Luke, I am your father," when the actual line is "No, I am your father"? Why do entire groups share identical, incorrect recollections? These anomalies hint at something deeper, something that can't be dismissed as mere coincidence. If memories can be implanted, what does that mean for personal identity? Our sense of self is built on memories. If those can be manipulated, then so can our beliefs, our loyalties, even our understanding of reality. A large-scale memory hack wouldn't just confuse us. It could control us. By rewriting the past, an unknown force could steer humanity's future. Imagine if wars, political movements, or scientific discoveries were subtly altered in our collective memory. Entire societies could be nudged in new directions without ever realizing they had been manipulated. This theory also raises an unsettling question. How would we know if our memories had been changed? If all the physical evidence, books, videos, photographs, aligns with the new reality, and only our minds resist, then what counts as true? Is reality defined by external proof or by internal experience? The Mandela effect forces us to confront the fragility of truth. In a world where memories and records can be edited, perhaps there is no objective history, only competing narratives. Some people believe they have found evidence of these edits. They point to residue or traces of the old reality left behind. For example, a mislabeled product, a film clip with the wrong line, or a book cover that doesn't match the current version. These fragments are seen as glitches, overlooked by the unknown force performing the memory hack. Skeptics dismiss them as misprints or anomalies, but to believers, they are proof that something or someone is rewriting the script. If the Mandela effect is a test, what is its purpose? Perhaps it's to measure how adaptable we are. Do we accept the new reality without resistance? Or do we question the world around us? Perhaps it's a stress test for humanity, designed to see how we handle cracks in the fabric of our existence. Or perhaps it's the first stage of something larger. If an unknown force can alter our memories in small ways, what happens when it begins making bigger changes, erasing entire events, rewriting history wholesale, or even deleting individuals from existence? Would we notice? Or would we continue on, blissfully unaware? In a way, the Mandela effect reflects our deepest fears about control and autonomy. It suggests that our minds are not entirely our own, that invisible hands might be shaping our thoughts. But it also hints at something more hopeful. If our perception of reality is malleable, then perhaps we have the power to shape it too. Maybe the Mandela effect isn't just a manipulation, it's a clue, a sign that reality is more flexible, more mysterious, and more open to change than we ever imagined. For now, the silence persists. No aliens have revealed themselves. No AI overlords have confessed to running simulations. No higher dimensional beings have pulled back the curtain. All we have are our memories and the unsettling realization that they may not be as reliable as we think. The Mandela effect invites us to ask dangerous questions. How do we know what's real? Who or what decides the truth? And if our memories can be rewritten, then what else might be an illusion? Until we find the answers, one thing remains clear. In this shifting, uncertain world, perhaps nothing is as it seems. The quantum suicide lottery. What if you've already won the lottery, but just not here? What if somewhere in another thread of reality, your numbers came up, your life changed overnight, and everything you ever dreamed of suddenly came true? You didn't just get lucky. You were always destined to win in at least one version of the universe. This isn't just a thought experiment to spark curiosity. It's the unsettling implication of a concept known as the quantum suicide lottery, a twist on the theory of quantum immortality, where consciousness doesn't just survive against all odds, but flows into the only timelines where it gets exactly what it wants. In this view, your experience is never of failure or death, but of narrow, inevitable triumph. Somewhere you always win. And more disturbingly, somewhere you already have. To understand this bizarre idea, we have to take a step into the quantum world, a realm governed not by certainty, but by probability. In classical physics, events are predictable and outcomes are determined. But in quantum mechanics, particles behave like waves of potentiality, existing in many states at once until measured. This is the infamous superposition, where a single particle can be both here and there, spinning in opposite directions simultaneously. It's only when we observe it that the wave function collapses into a definite state. But what if it never really collapses? What if, instead of picking one outcome and discarding the rest, the universe simply branches, splitting into countless parallel realities where every possible outcome plays out? This is the foundation of the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. Proposed by Hugh Everett in 1957, this view holds that every quantum event spawns new universes. When a coin is flipped, there isn't just heads or tails. There's a universe where it lands each way. Extend this to more complex events, and you begin to see the staggering scope. Every decision, every chance, every roll of the dice leads to a web of parallel timelines, endlessly dividing and diverging. In this picture, there isn't just one version of you. There are countless copies, living out every possibility. Now, take this a step further with the quantum suicide thought experiment. Imagine a scenario where a machine is designed to measure a quantum particle. If the particle spins one way, the machine fires a bullet. If it spins the other way, it doesn't. From the outside, the person inside the machine has a 50/50th chance of survival. But from the perspective of the person inside, according to many worlds, they only ever experience the timelines in which they survive. They never perceive the universe in which they die, because their consciousness continues only in the branches where it remains intact. In this chilling interpretation, death becomes a kind of illusion. You only ever live through the outcomes where you survive. Now apply this logic to the lottery. Every possible combination of lottery numbers plays out in a branching multiverse. In most branches, you don't win. In some, you match a few numbers. But in a few rare universes, you hit the jackpot. In those realities, your life changes completely. You become unimaginably wealthy. Your problems dissolve, and your possibilities explode. If consciousness filters into the branches where it survives or flourishes, then it follows that there are versions of you experiencing that unimaginable success. You've already won. Somewhere, it's already happened. The catch? You only consciously experience this branch, the one you're in now, the one where you didn't. That's the unsettling paradox at the heart of the quantum suicide lottery. You are already living in a sea of infinite outcomes, but your awareness is tethered to one thread at a time. Most of the time, that thread is mundane, predictable, familiar, but theoretically, your path could shift toward a winning timeline at any moment, drifting into the version of the universe where your numbers do come up. In a strange way, this belief acts like a quantum version of destiny, not a fixed future, but one guaranteed to exist somewhere. You don't hope to win. You know you already have, and you're just not there yet. Of course, this isn't a reason to stop working, dreaming, or making choices. The quantum lottery doesn't make your life effortless, but it reframes possibility. It suggests that your best life, the most extraordinary, unlikely version, is not just a fantasy, but a reality. One that's already playing out in some dimension. Your task, if you accept it, is to align your consciousness with it. But how do you do that? How do you navigate toward a better branch of the multiverse? Some theorists and philosophers propose that your thoughts and intentions play a role in this quantum drift. If all outcomes exist, then your expectations may serve as the compass guiding your experience. In a sea of infinite paths, belief and mindset might shape which branch your awareness follows. It's a soft form of quantum attraction, not the mystical law of attraction in a magical sense, but the idea that your internal state influences which version of reality you collapse into. If you act as if you're the kind of person who wins, someone lucky, worthy, and ready, then perhaps you slide, imperceptibly, into the timeline where that's true. But this raises difficult questions. If there are infinite versions of you, then which one is the real you? The one reading this text, or the one cashing the check in a nearby universe? Are you special, or just one among billions of branching selves, each trapped in their own slice of probability? More disturbingly, if some versions of you are lucky and others are miserable, what does that say about justice or fairness? Is your experience of the universe simply a lottery of consciousness, with no deeper meaning than random chance? And yet, within the framework of the quantum suicide lottery, Even the idea of chance becomes slippery. You don't randomly win. You must win somewhere. You always do. It's not a matter of if, but where. The question then becomes whether you're fated to experience that timeline, or whether your experience remains confined to this familiar path. Could your dreams be echoes from nearby branches? Could your déjà vu or strange intuitions be the pull of neighboring realities, brushing up against your own? This idea blurs the line between science and metaphysics, between hard physics and soft possibility. Some will say it's pseudoscience, a romanticization of an unprovable theory. Others will argue that it's the logical conclusion of a universe governed by probability. In the end, what matters is how it shapes your view of life. Does it inspire you to dream bigger, take more risks, or refuse to give up, knowing that success already exists somewhere? Or does it make the present feel hollow, as if your current life is just a branch where you didn't make it? Perhaps the true lesson of the quantum suicide lottery is that the boundaries between fate and free are thinner than we imagine. You are not just living one life. You are surfing the waves of possibility, moving moment to moment through an ocean of infinite versions. Most branches are quiet, ordinary, predictable. But some aren't. Some are wild, radical, and extraordinary. And just by continuing to exist, by surviving one moment after the next, you're already filtering toward the branches where you endure, where you succeed, where you win. You've already won the lottery. You just haven't opened the envelope yet. The false vacuum collapse. The universe feels stable. Stars shine for billions of years. Planets orbit in predictable rhythms, and the laws of physics appear unchanging. But what if this sense of stability is an illusion? What if the very fabric of reality is precariously balanced in a fragile state, a cosmic house of cards that could tumble without warning? This is the unsettling possibility posed by the concept of false vacuum decay, a scenario in which our universe isn't in the most stable state it could be. Instead, we're floating in a false vacuum, a kind of temporary energy bubble. If that bubble pops, everything we know, every atom, every law of physics, even the flow of time itself, would be rewritten in an instant. To understand this, imagine the universe as a landscape of hills and valleys. In physics, these valleys represent different energy states of the vacuum, the lowest possible energy a region of space can have. Our universe appears to rest in a valley, a place of stability where particles, forces, and matter behave in predictable ways. But what if this isn't the deepest valley? What if we're stuck in a shallower one, a false vacuum, while a true vacuum, a deeper, more stable valley, lurks below us? If so, our entire reality is metastable, meaning it appears stable for now, but could spontaneously collapse into this lower energy state. The mechanism behind this collapse is both simple and terrifying. At any moment, a tiny region of space could quantum tunnel through the energy barrier, separating our false vacuum from the true vacuum. This region would form a bubble of true vacuum, a sphere where the laws of physics are completely different. Once created, the bubble would expand at the speed of light, consuming everything in its path. There would be no warning, no chance to escape. When the bubble's edge reaches you, your particles would no longer exist as they do now. Electrons, protons, and even space-time itself could be annihilated or transformed into something unrecognizable. What makes this scenario so chilling is its finality. Unlike black holes or supernovas, which affect only parts of the universe, a false vacuum collapse rewrites reality itself. The forces that hold matter together, like electromagnetism and the strong nuclear force, might vanish or be replaced by new ones. Chemistry, biology, and life as we know it would instantly cease. To an observer inside the collapsing bubble, there would be no sense of destruction, because even time might unravel at the bubble's edge. It's not an apocalypse in the traditional sense. It's the end of our universe's story. But why do physicists take this idea seriously? The roots of the false vacuum theory lie in quantum field theory and our understanding of the Higgs field. The Higgs boson, discovered in 2012 at CERN, gave us a critical piece of the puzzle. Measurements of the Higgs mass and other fundamental constants suggest that the Higgs field sits uncomfortably in a metastable state, not a true minimum, but a delicate balance. It's like a marble resting on a plateau with a deep chasm nearby. The marble hasn't fallen yet, but quantum fluctuations could nudge it off at any time. This raises an unsettling question. Why hasn't the collapse happened already? If the universe has existed for over 13 billion years, shouldn't a bubble of true vacuum have formed somewhere by now? The answer may lie in cosmic inflation, the rapid expansion that occurred in the universe's first moments. Inflation might have stretched the false vacuum across vast regions of space, delaying collapse. Or perhaps a bubble has already formed, far, far away, and is racing toward us at the speed of light. Because nothing can travel faster than light, we would have no way of detecting its approach. The moment we learn of its existence would also be the moment we're destroyed. It's a thought experiment that strips away the comforting sense of permanence. All our achievements, our civilizations, our dreams, every trace of human existence could be erased without leaving a mark. And yet, this very fragility highlights the preciousness of life. To live in a metastable universe is to live on borrowed time, though we may never know how much remains. Some physicists argue that the universe collapsing into a true vacuum isn't necessarily bad. It is possible that the new vacuum would be more hospitable to life, or even more complex than our current one. Perhaps consciousness would emerge again under different rules, in a form we can't even imagine. But there's no guarantee. The constants of nature could shift so radically that matter as we know it wouldn't form. The universe could become a smooth, featureless expanse, cold, empty, and eternal. The false vacuum collapse also forces us to question the nature of reality. Is our universe just one bubble among countless others, each with its own laws of physics? In the multiverse hypothesis, regions of space can inflate and decay independently, spawning new pocket universes like foam on an ocean. If this is true, then our universe is just one bubble in an infinite froth of creation and destruction. Somewhere, other bubbles have already collapsed and been reborn. Somewhere, new universes are forming as we speak. For now, there's no way to predict or prevent false vacuum decay. It operates on quantum scales and cosmic timescales beyond human control. Perhaps that's a blessing. Unlike other existential risks, asteroid impacts, nuclear war, climate collapse, there's no action we can take. No plan, no defense. In a strange way, this frees us. If the universe could end in an instant, and there's nothing to be done, why not live fully in the fleeting present? Why not cherish the beauty of a sunrise, the sound of laughter, the simple joy of being alive? The idea of a metastable universe is terrifying, yes, but it's also humbling. It reminds us that the cosmos is far stranger and more delicate than our senses can grasp. The ground beneath our feet feels solid. The stars overhead seem eternal. But perhaps we are all suspended in a shimmering bubble of energy, floating in an ocean of deeper realities. And maybe, just maybe, the bubble is still strong enough to hold for a while longer. Until then, the universe carries on, silent and untroubled. Galaxies spin, stars are born and die, and life blooms in hidden corners. We are passengers in this bubble, unaware of what lies beyond its thin, invisible walls. And as we journey through this fragile cosmos, one truth endures. The very uncertainty of existence makes it all the more precious. Time wave zero. What if time isn't linear? What if it isn't even a steady river flowing from past to future, but a fractal wave, curling in on itself, speeding up, and pulling us toward a point of unimaginable complexity? This was the radical idea proposed by Terence McKenna, an ethnobotanist, philosopher, and psychedelic thinker whose theory of time wave zero suggested that history is not random but patterned, and that these patterns point to an approaching singularity. McKenna believed that time itself is evolving, drawing humanity into a vortex of novelty where change happens faster and faster, culminating in a moment when all boundaries dissolve. To McKenna, the end of history wasn't an apocalypse of destruction, but an awakening into infinite possibility. At the heart of McKenna's theory is the concept of novelty, which he described as the emergence of new, complex, and unexpected phenomena. In his view, the universe has a built-in tendency to create novelty. Stars forming from clouds of dust, life emerging from inanimate matter, consciousness arising from neural networks. Every step forward introduces new levels of complexity. Evolution, history, technology, and culture are all part of this accelerating process. As time progresses, the intervals between major breakthroughs shrink. What took millions of years in the early universe now takes decades or even months. The pattern suggests an exponential curve, an approach to a point of infinite novelty. McKenna claimed to have found evidence for this in the ancient Chinese text I Ching, or the Book of Changes. While studying the structure of the I Ching's hexagrams, 64 arrangements of broken and unbroken lines, McKenna noticed mathematical patterns that seemed to map onto historical events. With the help of his brother Dennis, he translated these patterns into a time graph, a fluctuating wave that tracked the rise and fall of novelty through history. This became the time wave zero graph. Peaks represented periods of stability and repetition. Valleys marked times of rapid innovation and chaos. According to the graph, history wasn't aimless. It was moving toward a final plunge, a singularity of infinite complexity. Initially, McKenna calculated this singularity to occur on December 21, 2012, coinciding with the end of the Mayan long count calendar. He envisioned this date as the end of time as we know it, not necessarily in a destructive sense, but as a transformation so profound that our current models of reality would no longer apply. Of course, 2012 came and went without any clear singularity. Critics dismissed the theory as pseudoscience, a product of wishful thinking and psychedelic visions. But others argue that McKenna's date was simply a miscalculation, or that the shift he predicted is still happening, invisible to those expecting fireworks. Consider the state of the world today. The pace of change has undeniably accelerated. In the span of a single human lifetime, we've gone from horse-drawn carts to space probes leaving the solar system, from handwritten letters to instantaneous global communication, from isolated cultures to a planetary civilization linked by the internet. Artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, quantum computing, and space colonization are no longer science fiction, they are on our doorstep. It's as if humanity is riding a wave of novelty, swept along toward an unknown horizon. For some, this feels like proof that McKenna was onto something. The singularity he spoke of may not have been a single date, but an extended process, a crescendo we're still building toward. In McKenna's vision, this approach to the singularity isn't purely technological. It's also psychological and spiritual. He suggested that time itself is speeding up because consciousness is evolving. The boundaries between self and other, dream and reality, physical and digital, are becoming porous. Virtual worlds, psychedelic experiences, and breakthroughs in neuroscience all hint at new dimensions of awareness. Perhaps the singularity isn't an external event at all, but an inner transformation, a collective awakening as humanity realizes its true potential. But what happens at the singularity? McKenna was intentionally vague, describing it as a horizon of infinite possibility. It could be a moment when consciousness breaks free from biology, merging with machines or accessing higher dimensions. It could be the birth of a planetary mind, where all human knowledge and experience integrate into a single superintelligence. Or it might be something beyond comprehension, an ontological leap as profound as the transition from lifeless matter to living cells. Whatever it is, McKenna believed that time itself would end, not because everything stops, but because everything happens at once. Past, present, and future collapse into a timeless now. Skeptics argue that McKenna's theory is more poetry than science. The time wave zero graph, derived from the I Ching, has no empirical basis. It reflects patterns imposed by the human mind rather than objective reality. And yet, there is a haunting resonance to McKenna's vision. Even without his graph, the world feels like it's rushing towards something. Climate change, political upheaval, technological disruption all suggest that the old ways are breaking down. Whether we're heading for utopia or catastrophe, stasis no longer seems possible. McKenna often compared the singularity to the moment of birth. From the perspective of the fetus, labor must feel like the end of the world, the safe, enclosed environment collapsing, the pressure building, the unknown approaching. But from the outside, it's not an end. It's a beginning. The singularity might feel the same to us. From within, we perceive chaos, crisis, and acceleration. From beyond, it could be the birth of something greater than we can imagine. Even if McKenna's specifics prove wrong, his broader insight remains provocative. Time is not uniform. It's textured, patterned, and alive. By seeing time as a fractal wave, we shift from passively enduring history to actively participating in it. Each choice we make, each innovation, each act of kindness or destruction ripples out, shaping the contours of the wave. We are not mere passengers. We are surfers on the crest of novelty. Perhaps the singularity has already begun, not as a single flash of transformation, but as a slow-motion event unfolding over decades. The signs are all around us. The blending of biology and technology, the rise of global consciousness, the dissolution of old paradigms. If McKenna's wave is real, then we are living in the steepest part of its descent, the moment when time itself folds in on itself. And if the wave is still building, then the most astonishing changes are yet to come. The precognition paradox. We're used to thinking of memory as a one-way street. The past leaves its mark on the present, but the future is blank, waiting to be written. Yet, what if this isn't the whole picture? What if, in rare and subtle moments, the arrow of time bends backwards? What if déjà vu, that eerie feeling of having experienced something before, isn't just a brain glitch, but a glimpse of the future, a memory leaking into the present? This is the unsettling idea behind the precognition paradox, a theory that suggests time might not flow as cleanly as we think. In some interpretations of quantum physics, causality is not strictly forward-facing. The future can influence the past, and information might ripple both ways across the timeline. If so, the boundaries between memory and foresight start to blur. At first glance, this seems impossible. How could you remember something that hasn't happened yet? But in the quantum realm, strange things happen all the time. Particles don't behave like solid objects, but like clouds of probability, existing in multiple states at once until observed. Some physicists, exploring the mathematical underpinnings of quantum mechanics, have noticed that the equations governing these particles don't care about time's direction. They work just as well if time runs backward as forward. To the universe, past and future may not be separate compartments, but part of a seamless whole. One such idea comes from retrocausality, the notion that effects can precede their causes. In this view, the future can send signals to the past, shaping it in subtle ways. For example, in certain quantum experiments, choices made by the observer in the present seem to retroactively determine the behavior of particles in the past. This doesn't mean we can send clear messages backward through time. It's more like a faint echo, a whisper traveling upstream against the flow of time. If consciousness is connected to the quantum world, as some theorists propose, perhaps these ripples occasionally enter our awareness. Consider déjà vu. You're walking into a room, and suddenly everything feels eerily familiar. The way the light falls, the sound of voices, even your own thoughts. You're struck with the unshakable sense that you've been here before. Neuroscience explains this as a glitch in the brain's memory circuits, a false overlap between the present and the past. But what if it's not a glitch at all? What if your brain, sensitive to quantum effects, is briefly registering information from your own future? Maybe the memory is real. It just hasn't happened yet. This idea isn't limited to déjà vu. Throughout history, people have reported moments of precognition, vivid dreams, sudden flashes of insight, or uncanny premonitions about events that later came to pass. While skeptics dismiss these as coincidences or selective memory, the precognition paradox suggests another possibility. If time is a two-way street, then the future might leave faint imprints on the present, like footprints pressed into soft clay before the traveler has even passed. In this model, time isn't a straight line, but a tapestry woven from countless threads of cause and effect. Each moment is linked not just to the past, but to the future, connected in a web of influence that stretches across the entire timeline. Your conscious experience moves forward, but the deeper quantum processes shaping reality may already be entangled with events yet to unfold. Of course, this raises troubling questions about free will. If you can remember the future, does that mean it's already fixed? Are you simply following a script, each choice predetermined, each action inevitable? Or is the future only partially formed, a branching tree of possibilities from which your awareness collapses one path into reality? In some interpretations, precognition doesn't mean destiny is set in stone. Instead, it's a glimpse of one potential future, one that might be altered by your awareness of it. This idea finds echoes in ancient philosophies. Many mystical traditions speak of time as cyclical or illusory, suggesting that all moments exist simultaneously. In these views, enlightenment involves stepping outside linear time, seeing past and future as facets of a single eternal present. Modern physics, in its own way, hints at something similar. Einstein's theory of relativity showed that time is not absolute, but intertwined with space in a four-dimensional fabric called spacetime. From this perspective, all events, past, present, and future, already exist. You aren't moving through time. You're traversing a fixed landscape, and memory is simply the way your consciousness lights up certain landmarks along the way. So why don't we remember the future more clearly? Perhaps because our brains evolved to process time in one direction, focusing on survival in a world where cause follows effect. Clear precognition might be too disruptive. It would collapse the delicate illusion of free will and make life unlivable. But if the precognition paradox is correct, traces of the future still seep through the cracks, dreams, hunches, déjà vu, reminding us that time is stranger than we can imagine. Skeptics argue that these ideas venture into pseudoscience. There's no hard evidence that consciousness can reach forward in time, but the mysteries of quantum mechanics leave room for speculation. In experiments like the delayed choice quantum eraser, the act of observation seems to retroactively determine whether a particle behaved like a wave or a particle in the past. If quantum systems can behave this way, why not the human mind? In the end, the precognition paradox challenges us to rethink our assumptions about time, memory, and self. What if your sense of linear progression is an artifact of consciousness, a narrative stitched together from glimpses of a timeless whole? What if, on some level, you already know how your story ends and how it begins again? Perhaps the next time you feel déjà vu, you'll pause and wonder, is this just a memory glitch? Or is it a message from your future self, echoing backwards through time? The infinite Boltzmann monkeys. Imagine a universe so vast, so boundless, that every possible configuration of particles must inevitably occur. In such a cosmos, there isn't just one version of you sitting here, reading these words. There are countless others, near-perfect copies scattered across space, each with the same memories, the same thoughts, the same fleeting sense of wonder. Some are identical down to the subatomic level. Others differ by a single atom, a single neuron firing differently, a single alternate thought flickering into existence. This is the strange and unsettling implication of infinity. In an infinite universe, everything that can happen must happen somewhere. This idea arises naturally from physics and probability. If space is infinite and matter arranged randomly beyond our observable horizon, then every possible arrangement of particles repeats endlessly. The atoms composing your body could, by sheer chance, assemble themselves again, not once, but an infinite number of times. Somewhere out there, another you is reading these words. Perhaps in another version, you pause halfway, or your phone buzzes, or you smile faintly at the idea. And somewhere else, and nearly identical, you reads these same sentences, but with a single typo in the text. Every possibility exists, nestled within the endless tapestry of creation. To make sense of this, consider the Boltzmann brain paradox, named after the 19th century physicist Ludwig Boltzmann. In trying to explain how order arises from chaos, Boltzmann imagined random fluctuations in a sea of particles. Given enough time, particles might spontaneously arrange themselves into complex structures, a molecule, a cell, even a conscious brain, complete with false memories and sensations. While wildly improbable, in an infinite universe with infinite time, such fluctuations must occur. Somewhere, a Boltzmann brain floats in the void, convinced it's living on Earth, unaware it's a momentary blip destined to dissolve back into entropy. Extend this idea to entire people, entire worlds, entire histories. Somewhere, there's a planet identical to Earth, orbiting a sun identical to ours. On that Earth, another you lives your life, perhaps 1 second ahead or behind, perhaps diverging slightly at some critical moment. And beyond that, there are worlds where things are almost the same, but not quite, where Shakespeare never existed, where dinosaurs never went extinct, where humanity evolved green skin or 3 arms, or never evolved at all. Infinity contains all possibilities, from the mundane to the bizarre. This brings us to the thought experiment of the infinite monkeys, a troop of monkeys pounding randomly on typewriters. Given infinite time, they would almost surely produce the complete works of Shakespeare, along with every possible novel, poem, and journal entry. In the infinite universe, the monkeys aren't metaphorical. They are the particles themselves, endlessly rearranging into every conceivable pattern. Somewhere, those particles form the thought you are having now. And somewhere else, they form a version of this thought with one slight variation. The implications are staggering. If every thought exists somewhere, then your consciousness is not unique. Every idea you've ever had, every dream, every moment of clarity or doubt, plays out again and again in countless minds. Somewhere, another you is making a different choice, taking a different path, saying different words. Somewhere, you didn't say goodbye in time. Somewhere, you never needed to. Does this make our lives meaningless, mere copies among infinite duplicates? Or does it make them more precious? In a universe where every possibility is realized, the fact that you are experiencing this particular thread of existence is remarkable. Out of infinite versions, this is the one your consciousness inhabits, right here, right now. The uniqueness isn't in the configuration, it's in the awareness. But there's a darker side to the infinite. If every joyful thought exists, so too does every nightmare. Somewhere, there's a version of you who has suffered more than you can imagine. Somewhere else, a version who has hurt others in ways you'd never allow yourself to. The infinite universe doesn't discriminate between good and bad, right and wrong. It contains them all in equal measure. This leads to strange philosophical questions. Are you morally responsible for what your counterparts do in other universes? If their thoughts are inevitable in the infinite, are yours? Is free will even meaningful when every possible decision is already realized somewhere? Some physicists argue that these infinite copies are not merely theoretical. In the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, every possible outcome of every quantum event creates a branching universe. In this view, infinity isn't just out there beyond the stars. It's stacked in layers all around you. Every choice you make splits reality into parallel timelines. Somewhere, you turned left instead of right. Somewhere, you never read this text. Somewhere, you wrote it. Yet in our daily lives, infinity is invisible. We can only perceive one thread at a time, one moment unfolding after another. The infinite monkeys type away beyond our awareness, their chaotic dance forming and unforming worlds we will never see. And perhaps that's a mercy. If we could perceive the vastness of infinity all at once, our sense of self might dissolve entirely. Still, there's beauty in the thought that your existence is echoed across the cosmos. Somewhere, another you is laughing at the same joke, pondering the same mystery, staring at the same stars. And somewhere, another you has found the answers you're still searching for. The quantum immortality suicide cult. What if death is an illusion, not because souls ascend to heaven or reincarnate, but because physics forbids you from ever experiencing it? What if, no matter how certain your demise seems, your consciousness always finds a way to slip into a universe where you survive? This is the chilling implication of quantum immortality, a thought experiment rooted in quantum mechanics. It suggests that from your own perspective, you are unkillable. Even if your body fails in countless parallel worlds, there is always one branch of reality where you live on. Now imagine a group of people who take this idea literally, a cult convinced that death cannot touch them. They embrace suicide not as an end, but as a gateway to eternal survival. In their minds, every attempt to die must fail because the dead don't experience death. To understand how such a belief could arise, we must first step into the strange world of quantum physics. At the quantum level, particles don't behave like solid objects. They exist as probabilities, smeared across multiple potential states until observed. In the many worlds interpretation, every possible outcome of a quantum event actually occurs, each in its own branching universe. When you flip a coin, there isn't just heads or tails. There are universes where each result plays out. Now apply this idea to life and death situations. Suppose you are in a scenario where survival depends on quantum randomness, a gun firing or not firing based on the decay of a radioactive atom. In most universes, the atom decays, the gun fires, and you die. But in a tiny fraction of universes, the atom doesn't decay. The gun doesn't fire. You live. Here's where quantum immortality enters. If consciousness is tied to the quantum wave function, as some theories suggest, then your awareness would continue only in the branches where you survive. From your own perspective, you never die. You might suffer injuries, watch loved ones perish, and find yourself in increasingly improbable situations, but you would always remain conscious. No matter how small the odds, there would always be one thread of reality where you make it through. Now imagine someone who believes this fully. To them, death is impossible. The world might carry on with funerals and obituaries in other branches, but in the reality they experience, their suicide attempt simply fails. The gun jams, the rope snaps. The overdose doesn't take. Over and over, they awaken in a hospital bed, scarred but alive. They might even see these failures as proof of quantum immortality. Each survival feels like a miracle, a sign that they are destined to persist forever. This idea is both fascinating and horrifying. A group of believers could form around it, calling themselves immortals. They might test the theory in increasingly reckless ways, playing Russian roulette, leaping from heights, seeking ever more lethal situations. From the outside, their bodies would pile up in morgues, families would grieve, and the cult would be remembered as a tragic footnote in history. But from the perspective of each believer, there is no end. They simply wake up again and again, trapped in a loop of survival they can't escape. And here lies the paradox. Quantum immortality promises eternal life, but not eternal youth or health. In surviving countless brushes with death, one might end up crippled, burned, or in excruciating pain, kept alive by sheer quantum chance. In some branches, you might survive as little more than a brain in a jar, kept conscious by machines. The cult's pursuit of immortality could become a curse, their members haunted by endless suffering in universes where death refuses to come. This raises unsettling questions about consciousness. If quantum immortality is true, does it mean you are destined to experience every possible form of survival, no matter how improbable? Even if the odds are 1 in a trillion, is there always a universe where your heart keeps beating? Or is there some deeper mechanism that allows awareness to end? Skeptics dismiss quantum immortality as a misunderstanding of quantum mechanics. They argue that consciousness doesn't hop between universes and that death is final. But the thought experiment remains provocative because it touches on our deepest fears and hopes. We long for survival. We fear the void. And in the quantum multiverse, there is a faint, disquieting possibility that we might get what we wish for, not blissful eternity, but an endless series of improbable escapes. The time cube. There are strange ideas. There are bold ideas. And then there is the time cube, a theory so strange, so unhinged, that it feels less like science and more like a fever dream spilled onto a chalkboard. Proposed by Jean Ray, a self-proclaimed wisest human, the time cube theory argued that time isn't linear, nor even cyclical. Instead, it's cubic. According to Ray, every rotation of the Earth doesn't produce a single day, but 4 simultaneous days, each unfolding in their own corner of reality. He insisted that the world's scientists, educators, and leaders were suppressing this truth, and that humanity was trapped in ignorance, unable to perceive the full structure of time. To Ray, time cube wasn't just a theory. It was a revelation that, once understood, would unlock the deepest secrets of existence. At its core, the time cube theory sounds simple enough. As the Earth rotates, 4 corners of the planet experience what Ray called simultaneous days. Noon, midnight, sunrise, and sunset, he argued, are not sequential events, but coexisting time points. In his view, each corner of the Earth passes through these phases in a way that splits the day into 4 overlapping quadrants. Thus, we don't live in a world of single-day time, but in a universe of 4-dimensional cubic time. To Jean Ray, this was obvious and undeniable. To everyone else, it was either incomprehensible or utterly absurd. Ray's writings and lectures were sprawling, peppered with cryptic diagrams and relentless accusations that mainstream science was a time conspiracy enslaving the masses. He railed against educators for teaching what he saw as linear time lies, calling them evil for denying children the truth of time cube. His language was often incoherent, blending quasi-medical terms with emotional outbursts and bizarre metaphors. At times, his explanations slipped into poetry, or perhaps madness. He warned that failing to understand time cube would doom humanity to extinction, as we were out of harmony with the true flow of time. Despite its eccentricity, the time cube attracted a cult following online. Some were fascinated by its audacity. Others were drawn to Ray's persona, a lone prophet raging against the entire edifice of modern knowledge. College students invited him to campuses to speak, unsure if he was a genius, a crank, or both. His lectures often devolved into rants about the corruption of society and the ignorance of single-day thinkers. To his critics, time cube was little more than word salad. To Ray, it was the key to everything: life, death, the universe, and even morality. The sheer weirdness of time cube raises a question. Why did it capture so many imaginations? perhaps because it resonates, however faintly, with ancient ideas of time as a multifaceted phenomenon. Many cultures have conceived of time in nonlinear ways, cycles, spirals, layers of reality stacked atop one another. In some mythologies, different realms experience time differently. Ray's cubic time, in its own bizarre way, echoes these metaphors, twisting them into a modern, pseudo-scientific framework. But make no mistake, Time Cube was not science. It was never peer-reviewed, never mathematically rigorous, and never supported by evidence. Physicists dismissed it outright, noting that it misrepresents basic astronomy and physics. The Earth's rotation produces day and night in a smooth cycle, not in overlapping quadrants. Yet Ray dismissed all criticism as part of a grand cover-up. To him, the refusal of experts to engage with Time Cube was proof of its truth. As the years passed, Ray became more radical and paranoid. He claimed to possess wisdom beyond all other humans, calling himself the greatest mathematician and scientist ever born. He also declared that belief in a single day was evil, equating it to intellectual slavery. His website, TimeCube.com, became infamous for its dense walls of text, strange fonts, and aggressive rhetoric. Visitors weren't sure if they were reading a brilliant satire, a tragic descent into mental illness, or both. Yet buried beneath the ranting and confusion, there is something oddly poetic about Time Cube. It's a reminder of how deeply humans crave patterns, even in chaos. Ray saw connections others didn't. He believed the ordinary flow of time was an illusion, and that a more complex reality was hiding in plain sight. In that sense, he joins a long tradition of visionaries, some brilliant, some deluded, who challenged the world's assumptions. But there's a tragic element too. Jean Ray's life became defined by this one idea, isolating him from any meaningful dialogue with the scientific community. He wasn't a Galileo, persecuted for speaking truth to power. He was a man shouting into the void, convinced the void was conspiring against him. When he died in 2015, Time Cube faded into obscurity, surviving only in fragments on the internet and in the memories of those who encountered his work. Today, Time Cube lives on as a curiosity, a meme, and a cautionary tale. It's a window into the mind of someone wrestling with reality, convinced he alone held the key. And while the theory is undeniably false, it leaves us with an unsettling question. How would we know if we were wrong about time? What if there are aspects of reality, stranger, subtler, and more profound than Time Cube, that we simply can't perceive? For now, we accept the flow of days and nights, trusting the clock to tick forward. But somewhere, Jean Ray's ghost may still be muttering, "You are enslaved by a single day, and you don't even know it." The Omphalos Hypothesis. What if everything you know about the history of the universe is an elaborate illusion? What if the ancient rocks beneath your feet, the fossils of long-dead creatures, and even the light from distant galaxies are not remnants of a deep past, but props in a cosmic stage set? This is the unsettling idea behind the Omphalos Hypothesis, a theological proposal suggesting that the universe was created recently, but with all the signs of great antiquity built in from the very start. To its adherents, the bones of dinosaurs, the rings of ancient trees, and the billions of years encoded in starlight are not evidence of a world billions of years old, but features deliberately woven into creation by God. The term omphalos comes from the Greek word for navel. In 1857, naturalist Philip Henry Goss posed a provocative question. If Adam, the first man, was created as an adult, would he have had a belly button? The navel is a scar, evidence of a connection to a mother's womb. But if Adam was never born in the usual way, his navel would serve no purpose except as an artifact, a false clue pointing to a history that never happened. Goss took this analogy and applied it to the entire universe. Just as Adam might have been created with a belly button, the cosmos might have been created with all the marks of a long history, mountain ranges shaped by ancient erosion, stars sending us light that appears to have traveled for millions of years, and fossils of creatures that never actually lived. In this view, God didn't just create the world. He also created the appearance of a world that had existed for eons. The dinosaur bones in museums were never part of living animals. The radioactive decay measured in rocks never truly unfolded over billions of years. The photons arriving from distant galaxies never left their stars. They were created midstream, giving us the illusion of cosmic depth. The universe was spoken into being whole, complete with a ready-made backstory. To Gauss, this solved a profound theological dilemma. In the 19th century, geology and paleontology were uncovering evidence of an Earth far older than the biblical timeline suggested. Layers of rock revealed eons of change. Fossils spoke of species rising and falling long before humans appeared. For believers who held to a literal reading of Scripture, this posed a crisis. How could a world just a few thousand years old contain so much evidence of deep time? The Omphalos hypothesis offered a way out. God created the world recently, but designed it to look ancient. But this solution raised disturbing questions. If God embedded false clues in creation, does that make him a deceiver? Why would a truthful creator seed the universe with evidence of events that never occurred? Is the Omphalos hypothesis an act of theological insight, or a desperate attempt to defend faith against science? Critics of the hypothesis were quick to point out its moral implications. If we cannot trust the universe to tell us its own story, then what can we trust? Science, history, even our own memories could all be illusions. Taken to its extreme, the Omphalos idea collapses into solipsism, the belief that only one's own mind is certain to exist and all else may be fabricated. If God can create the appearance of time, what stops him from creating the appearance of yesterday, complete with false memories and records? You might have been created 5 minutes ago, with all your experiences preloaded like a program booting up. The Omphalos hypothesis also clashes with the idea of a rational, comprehensible God. Theology often teaches that God's creation reveals his nature, that the heavens declare his glory and the earth his handiwork. If nature's testimony is false, then the very idea of revelation is undermined. What kind of God would leave humanity stranded in a universe of lies? Yet the Omphalos hypothesis refuses to die. Modern versions of the idea persist, especially among some creationist thinkers who argue that God created the world with mature features. Just as Adam and Eve were created as adults, they say, the earth was created fully formed, with mountains, rivers, forests, and fossils already in place. To them, the apparent age of the universe is not evidence against creation, but proof of its divine craftsmanship. Others find a strange poetry in the idea. If God did create the universe with an invented past, perhaps it was an act of artistic genius rather than deception. The fossils and starlight become part of a grand narrative, a cosmic prologue written for our benefit. In this interpretation, the ancient-looking universe isn't a lie, it's a story God wrote for us, giving humanity a sense of place and mystery. But for many, the hypothesis is deeply unsatisfying. Science depends on the assumption that the universe is consistent and reliable, that observations reflect reality. If we embrace the idea that the universe was created with fake history, then science itself loses its foundation. How could we ever know which data are real and which are planted? In the end, the Omphalos hypothesis confronts us with a profound choice. Do we trust the evidence of our senses and the methods of science? Or do we cling to theological certainty at all costs? Is the universe an honest book we can read, or a stage set hiding secrets we will never uncover? Perhaps the most unsettling part of the Omphalos hypothesis is this: there is no way to disprove it. A universe created 5 minutes ago would look identical to one that evolved over billions of years. All the evidence, fossils, starlight, memories would be the same in both scenarios. The idea is unfalsifiable, immune to testing or observation. And in science, what cannot be tested is usually set aside as irrelevant. Yet the question lingers. When you hold a fossil in your hand, are you touching the remains of an ancient creature or a carefully planted artifact? When you look at the stars, are you seeing ancient light from distant suns or photons set in motion just for you? The Omphalos hypothesis challenges us to think not just about science and theology, but about reality itself. What does it mean to trust in a world that might have been written as a story? And if we are characters in that story, how do we ever know the truth? Perhaps we don't. Perhaps all we can do is live as though the world is real, as though our histories and fossils and memories matter, even if they were created yesterday.